securing funding to do an intra-county passenger ferry business plan. And we were successful. The state has provided us with some funding, and we're just about to go on the street to hire a consultant to help us explore the feasibility of having intra-county type of ferry operation. I will say one of them, thank you, council member. One of the routes that's going to be looked at would be from Winslow to Bremerton. Another would possibly be from Silverdale to Bremerton. And then we're just going to explore the feasibility of any other communities to try to tie us together, utilizing things
1, 2,
other
3, 4,
than
test.
the roads. So those are just a few things that occurred during Councilmember Snyder's time on the Kitsap Transit Board. And once again, my apologies for being tardy on this, but if I may approach the bench, I would like to present you with a little token of our appreciation, and it says Kitsap Transit. Our sincere thanks to Leslie Snyder in recognition and appreciation of her service on the Kitsap Transit Board of Commissioners 2021 to 2023.
Oh, thanks, John. Oh, no worries. Also to be 18 and under is free.
Oh, that's right, we did. I have the box here for you if you would like. Oh. One thing I forgot, Councilmember Snyder just reminded me that one of the other things that we did was, which pretty significant, was that we did the fare free for youth in Kitsap County for 18 and under. So that was pretty monumental as well. So again, thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next, we have, we're presenting the proclamation declaring February 2025 as Black History Month.
Okay. A proclamation by the City Council of the City of Bainbridge Island, Washington, declaring February 2025 as Black History Month. Whereas the national celebration of Black history began in 1926 as a week-long event created by African-American historian, scholar, educator, and publisher Carter G. Woodson, and whereas it became an annually observed commemorative month in February 1976, and whereas the Black History Month 2025 theme, African Americans in Labor, underscores the diverse and significant ways in which labor, whether voluntary or involuntary, skilled or unskilled, free or unfree, has been at the core of the Black American experience. And whereas Black History Month is a time to honor the often overlooked achievements of Black Americans, and whereas Black History Month also serves as a reminder of the historical and present-day racism that continues to oppress Black Americans, and that the work to eliminate barriers based on racial bias and prejudice is ongoing. And whereas despite this ongoing structural racism born from the unconscionable legacy of enslavement and legalized segregation, Black Americans continue to make significant contributions to the growth of their families and to the artistic, athletic, cultural, economic, educational, legislative, and scientific fabric of our nation and our city. And whereas we encourage residents of Bainbridge Island to actively engage with and learn from Black-centered experiences, such as the Radiant Reflections, celebrating the beauty of the African diaspora exhibit at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, and to do so well beyond the month of February. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Ashley Matthews, Mayor of the City of Bainbridge Island, Washington, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim February 2025 as Black History Month in the City of Bainbridge Island, and encourage all islanders to join us in this special observance. Signed this 11th day of February 2025, Ashley Matthews, Mayor. And I'm going to be presenting these three proclamations to Akuye Vargas, Renee Bishop, and Olivia Hall, the co-chairs of REACT.
Good evening, council members. I want to thank you, first of all, for recognizing the importance of Black history, but more importantly, the humanity of African Americans in this country and in our community. On behalf of REAC, I'd like to thank you for your support and your willingness to walk with us on this continuing journey towards making Bainbridge Island a place where all people can thrive regardless of race, sexual identity, or any of the other ways that people may historically marginalized groups may identify. For me personally, I'm thankful that especially given the direction of the current administration for the country, I'm very thankful that I live in a community where we have leaders that are willing to do the right thing. Thank you.
Good evening, council members, mayor, community. How are y'all all tonight? I just want to thank you all for all the work that you are doing to make our island a more equitable place to live. But I really want to thank you all for supporting not just Black History Month, but supporting the families and the children and the community members that have come here to live, to work, to go to school, to make this community a more welcoming place for all. You know, I have lived here on Bainbridge for 35 years, and I can tell you that it wasn't until 2018 that I really felt like our community was really working diligently on equity, inclusion, and diversity, and what it meant for all of us to feel safe in this community. During that time period, there were handbills of hate that was going across our community. And this city council stepped up to formulate a race equity advisory council, which was a catalyst for the work of race equity across our county. And I want to commend you, and I want to commend the community here that supported that work, because that work wasn't easy. And there were many challenges, but I want to thank this council for working not just hard or diligently, but they put their money where their mouth is and begin to train their city council members and begin to really look at some of the disparities that was happening across this community, but also across our county. So I want to just say thank you again for the work that you are doing and continually doing to make our community and our county and our state a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our last two proclamations are very, very special and a long time coming, 3 decades or so to be exact. First, we will have a proclamation recognizing the service of accounting manager Carl Shaw upon his retirement. Okay. Well, first read it. Yeah.
Proclamation by the City Council of the City of Bainbridge Island, Washington, recognizing accounting manager Carl Shaw upon his retirement. Whereas Carl Shaw joined the city in 1995, providing the City of Bainbridge Island with 30 years of dedicated service and financial expertise. And whereas Carl began his city career as the accounting manager in the finance department and has held that position ever since. And whereas Carl has consistently demonstrated outstanding employee performance that includes competence, professionalism, respect for others, a cheerful attitude, and a deep love of Bainbridge Island. And whereas through Carl's leadership, the city has received 9 consecutive awards for Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in financial reporting and has enjoyed the highest possible credit rating from Moody's Credit Rating since 2019. And whereas Carl is a dedicated public servant and team member whose expertise, pragmatism, and problem solving will be sorely missed. And whereas the city of Bainbridge Island wishes to extend its gratitude and appreciation to Carl for his faithful service and many contributions to the city of Bainbridge Island. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Ashley Matthews, Mayor of the city of Bainbridge Island, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize Accounting Manager Carl Shaw on his retirement, extend sincere thanks for his service, and encourage all Bainbridge Island residents to thank and congratulate Carl upon his retirement. And dated this 11th day of February 2025, signed by Ashley Matthews.
Mayor?
No.
Mayor,
Oh, Councilmember Marwa.
I move approval of the proclamation recognizing the 30 years of service of Accounting Manager Carl Shaw.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Carl, for your service. Okay, and last and definitely not least, we are going to recognize Roz and approve the proclamation recognizing the service of Executive Assistant Roz Lazoff upon her retirement.
Okay, well, it is my honor to do this proclamation. A proclamation by the City Council of the City of Bainbridge Island, Washington, recognizing Executive Assistant Roz Lasloff upon her retirement. Whereas Roz Lasloff joined the City of Bainbridge Island in 1993 and has served as a key member of the city team for 31 years and 7 months. And whereas Roz began her city career as a clerk in the planning department, and whereas Roz also served as a department secretary and deputy city clerk in the finance department, and city clerk and an executive assistant in the executive department, and whereas Roz can recognize the phone numbers and voices of many community members and knows just how to help each one. Whereas Roz is a dedicated public servant and team member whose expertise, institutional knowledge, and empathy will be sorely missed. Whereas the City of Bainbridge Island wishes to extend its gratitude and appreciation to Roz for her faithful service and many contributions to the City of Bainbridge Island. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Ashley Matthews, Mayor of the City of Bainbridge Island, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize Executive Assistant Roz Lasloff on her retirement, extend sincere thanks for her service, and encourage all Bainbridge Island residents to thank and congratulate Roz when they see her around the island. Dated this 11th day of February 2025. And let me just go right into the motion. I move to authorize the mayor to sign the proclamation recognizing the 31 years and 7 months of service for Executive Assistant Roz Lasloff.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Councilmember Dietz, seconded by Councilmember Morawaki. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, next is public comment. So in-person public comment is accepted at this time on any topic of public interest. Each commenter will have 3 minutes. Public comment is not to be taken on individual agenda items during the meeting. So speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. First is Mary Claire Kirsten.
Hi, good evening. Oops. Mary Claire Kirsten, 145 Ferncliff. This is about regarding the groundwater management plan slideshow. Because I am not a scientist, I'm providing 4 general observations about the groundwater management plan update slideshow in the packet. The first one, at page 6. So on page 6 is this statement, quote, State Department of Ecology has closed portions of the Fletcher Bay and Murden Cove watersheds. This could someday prevent approval of new water rights and individual wells that impact water from regulated streams, unquote. My understanding is that closure of these watersheds means no new wells. So why is a question, why is staff saying, quote, could someday prevent, unquote, new wells? My second comment is on page 8. On page 8, it is confirmed that water use has increased 2%, while population increased only 1%. So water consumption from our finite aquifers is increasing by twice as much as the population. This seems to leave out commercial uses such as wineries, breweries, and refilling and drainage of multiple large swimming pools. So the actual water use percentage is even higher. And this confirms the water use is accelerating, something staff has been disputing. At page 12, third comment, page 12, it is confirmed that within the 20-year horizon, the deep aquifer Kobe uses will decrease by up to 20 feet. Just having enough for the people on the system leaves out half the island who are on private wells that will be, according to the prior memo, adversely impacted by the municipal pumping of the deep aquifer. My last comment is also regarding page 12. It is confirmed that after just 20 years, alternative deep wells will have to be found. It seems clear, again, that the population growth demanded under the DEIS is not sustainable. Thank you.
Next is Pam Churchill.
Good evening. I'm not good with this mic. Is it working? Okay, good. We are here tonight to reaffirm our commitment that Bainbridge Island is an inclusive and welcoming city. There's a long history of supporting human rights on Bainbridge Island and protecting vulnerable communities and individuals. A majority of Bainbridge Islanders did not approve of the shameful removal and internment of Japanese Americans in World War II. Many people took care of their neighbors' property until their return. I learned about it when I moved here, and I'm proud of their actions. I was here in 2001 when hateful graffiti was painted on the road by the Filipino American Community Hall, and Jewish grave sites were desecrated at the Port Blakely Cemetery. There was an immediate reaction with a No Hate Here rally and march in Winslow, and volunteers got to work removing the graffiti and restoring the grave sites. We are in a time when this core community value is being challenged again. Pressure to target or dehumanize anyone is intolerable. Together, we can show the same determination that has been demonstrated here in the past. We are remembering and affirming who we are and joining a multitude of others to tilt the balance towards justice.
Thank you. Maria Metzler.
Good evening, members of the council. I'm Maria Metzler, the Executive Director of Helpline House. You have on the agenda tonight a partial revision of the city's EV charger code. It brings the city's requirements for new commercial construction in line with those of the state, in part by reducing the requirement to install infrastructure, for potential future charger spaces, while leaving the current multifamily housing portion of the code intact. In September, a well-researched report from the Climate Change Advisory Committee laid out reasons for the recommended changes in the EV charger code with respect to commercial construction, and staff has implemented those changes thoughtfully. The code has appeared twice before the Planning Commission and at your regular business meeting, and is now before you. I urge you to approve the proposed ordinance as written. Some of you may be aware that Helpline House is planning to build a new facility on our current site. I know it is bad process to create policy based on a particular individual or situation, but I would like to tell you a few ways the code affects our project and would apply to other organizations or projects in the future. Keeping the current ordinance as is adds substantial cost to construction. Even if it's just trenching and laying empty conduit for the additional EV-capable spaces, that's not free. With regard to EV-ready spots, trenching, laying conduit, pulling cable, and hooking it up to a larger electrical panel with the expanded capacity to handle potential future loads is a substantial cost, as is the additional cost for a larger transformer to handle loads that may or may not ever come into existence. At Helpline, our clientele don't generally drive EVs, so the EV spots on our private property would be mainly used by volunteers working a few hours at a time at Helpline House. Our volunteers all live on Bainbridge. You can see from the CCAC report that EV owners overwhelmingly charge at home, especially when they are only making short trips, so most EV charging spots wouldn't be used. Finally, leaving the code unchanged could ultimately result in our facility having to have as many as 60% of our parking spaces reserved for electric vehicle use only while charging. EV charging isn't free, so we could ultimately be required to have as many as 60% of our spots set aside as paid parking. That does not serve our clientele well at all, nor does it suit the city's desire to promote equity. I urge you to approve the revised ordinance regarding EV charging requirements for commercial construction that you have before you this evening. The city will still be a climate leader with respect to residential construction and EV charging. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Debbie Haas.
Hi, I'm Debbie Haase from the south end of Bainbridge Island, and thank you so much for proclaiming this month Black History Month. And thanks to Akuye and Rennie for holding up so much in our community, as you all do. I'm here with a lot of thanks today for all the work that you all are doing, City Council and Mayor, to make this a welcoming and inclusive city, a place to live and work that feels welcoming and inclusive to people. And so we want to express our appreciation, our gratitude for that creation and implementation of the Bainbridge Island Welcoming and Inclusive City Resolution 2017-09 and the Ordinance 2017-06 related to the community policing, and for the Police Policy 413. And one of the other sweet little things we want to appreciate is the Keep Washington Working Act copies that are on the counter in both Spanish and English right here at City. And thank you for also for caring so much for the residents of the diverse and vulnerable communities by having an equity and inclusion manager, and by having the longstanding Race Equity Advisory Committee. Their work is so valuable, especially in these times with our current administration. So we're urging the city mayor and officials to continue to support them so they can do their continued work and meet their responsibilities that care for the community. It's like, I feel so lucky, you know, we live on Bainbridge Island, and as leaders are leaders in the county, because I go to a lot of city council meetings, leaders in the county in this area, and I really want to thank you for that. And I really want to urge you to stay strong on the values, because not all councils are doing that right now. Stay strong with the positions, the ordinances, the resolutions, and really stay true to the values. And so we see that some of these ordinances are being affirmed, hopefully. But also, we'd like to ask, like other cities, we'd ask you to put out a public statement that affirms to the vulnerable, so it really shows the community where you're at. So in a public way that reaffirms, that this is a safe and welcoming community. So just like, last time REAC was here to ask the city council to uphold and review the Keep Washington Working Act, we're asking you to do that also, and making sure that each sector in the city is aware of the Keep Washington Working Act, and update whatever protocols. Okay, thanks. Rachel's continuing for me.
Thanks, Debbie. Next, Rachel Reese.
I'm just waiting for the time. I'm just going to start. When we say all sectors, we include the BI Police Department. To further help residents and workers on BI Bainbridge feel safe, we asked the police department to release a statement, as many other police departments have done as well. We're curious why Bainbridge Island Police Department is not listed as one of the police departments in the recent Kitsap Sun article titled Law Enforcement in Kitsap Adhering to State Law on Immigration Enforcement. Paulsbo, Port Orchard, Bremerton, and the Sheriff's Department are all named, but not Bainbridge Island. What's that about? We are appreciative of all the ways Police Policy 413 works to protect immigrants. Thank you. There are a few parts of the policy 413 that we are concerned about and request clarification and/or correction. In 413.4, it states that members of this department shall not participate in federal operations as part of any detention team unless it is in direct response to a request for assistance on a temporary basis or for officer safety. We're curious what this means. As stated, it appears like this section of the policy is in contradiction to the Keep Washington Working Act. To us, this reads that police will participate in federal operations if any federal department asks them to. In addition, under the immigration violations section of BI Police Policy 413.6E, it says that in order to obtain consent, the person shall be provided with oral explanation and a written consent form that explains the purpose of the interview. Not everyone speaks or reads English. How will this information and forms be given to ensure that all parties understand completely and thoroughly? Finally, in the police training section of Policy 413, we couldn't find anything that includes training on the Washington state law of the Keep Washington Work Act, and it's still law. How is specific training on the Keep Washington Working Act included in police training? We would like the police department to provide more transparency around their police training. We want to thank WASIN, Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, and CARE, Kitsap Advocating for Immigrant Rights and Equality, for being incredible resources for immigrants and allies, and for bringing current state law and other strategies to our attention. Again, thank you for ensuring that our valuable immigrant and vulnerable community members can be on Bainbridge without fear for their safety and well-being. Thank you for being equity leaders in Kitsap, upholding Black History Month, and with these policies and resolutions, hopefully future statements, and all the good work that you do. As the Dear Kitsap Care and K Forge, which is Kitsap for Racial Justice, organizer said recently at a Bremerton City Council meeting, we must choose courage over comfort every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jill Baumberg. Hi, Jill.
Good evening. My name is Jill Bamberg, and I am president of the Bainbridge Island Rowing, or BIR as it's familiarly known. I'm here tonight to address item 8D, as in dog, on your regular business agenda, proposed resolution number 2025-03, concerning rental fees for the lawn area adjacent to the new BIR boathouse. First, let me say a little bit about BIR. We are a 501c3 organization that has served the Bainbridge Island community for 24 years. Our junior rowing program serves approximately 105 youth from 8th through 12th grades. It is one of the largest, if not the largest, sports programs in the high school, and it is highly inclusive. It serves boys, girls, and trans youth equally. It is one of only 2 no-cut sports that can yield a varsity letter, and roughly 20% of our rowers are supported by scholarships, thanks to our members and the larger Bainbridge community. Our adult rowing program currently serves approximately 100 adults, half of whom are seniors over the age of 60. Rowing is a lifetime sport that provides fitness and community benefits to people of all ages. Our newest programs are built around community use of our new boathouse. We regularly host rowing programs, CPR classes, senior center classes, Rotary Club meetings, and other nonprofit activities. The space is also rented by islanders for all sorts of special occasions, primarily weddings and memorial services, but also anniversary celebrations, bar and bat mitzvahs, community meetings, and fundraisers. The funds raised by BIR from the rental of this facility are currently used to repay lenders to the capital campaign that built the center for the community. I say all this because although rowing as a sport has traditionally had a somewhat elitist reputation, I want you to know that this is not the case on Bainbridge Island. BIR is a homegrown organization widely utilized and supported by the local community. With respect to the matter at hand, that is, the proposal to increase the fees on the use of the lawn immediately east of and adjacent to the boathouse, we have several concerns. The first has to do with the amount of the proposed fees, going from a single $75 special event permit to a $100 special event permit plus a rental fee of $370 for residents or $470 for non-residents. Although the city maintains that this is comparable to fees of other municipal jurisdictions, it is not comparable to fees of other jurisdictions on Bainbridge Island. The most common fee for parks and recreation picnic shelters is $31 per hour. The charge for even a 4-hour event rental at a sheltered picnic area is still only a third of the proposed rate for the lawn area in question, way too high to be considered comparable. Our second concern has to do with the intended payees of this fee. In the last year, the lawn has been regularly used on an as-available basis by a group of Pacankey players from the senior center, by 4 large community-sponsored events, and by special event rentals associated with the BIR boathouse. While we are told that the city's goal is to treat everyone equitably, there is no question that the burden of this particular fee will fall most heavily on those who wish to use the lawn in conjunction with their rental of the BIR boathouse.
Thank you.
I've written my statement, so I can leave it here for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Lisa Neal.
Good evening, Council. It's Lisa Neal. We're revising our comprehensive plan this year, and it's deja vu all over again. The last time we did this in 2016, we had council working on this with a consultant. We had ad hoc informal committees out in the community making comments, going to their council members, having meetings, providing written comments, and it was a very collaborative process. And at the last Planning Commission meeting, the planning director called it the best comprehensive plan she'd ever seen. This time around, I've just discovered that the initial revisions are being done by staff and consultants, and that the council members are not having any input. The community is not having any input. I requested a copy of the latest revisions so the community could start looking at what was being proposed by staff and consultants. And I don't have a copy of that yet. And I've been told by the public records officer that it has to go through a legal analysis to see whether Kobe can keep that document from the public. So this is very confusing and concerning to me and to other community members that I've spoken with. And I have to ask you, have we learned nothing from the DEIS debacle? You know, we have a 615-page DEIS that was created essentially behind closed doors without input from you, without the council, without input from the public until after it was completed. And is this going to happen again? Are we going to be presented with, here are the comp plan revisions, and you've got until next week because they're due. We're already overdue. This is just not the way we did it last time. And I don't understand why we've changed it so much. My request to you guys is take some more ownership of this process and say, make a motion or do whatever you need to do and say to staff and the consultants that we want this to be a collaborative and public process, that we want to have perhaps a council committee working on this, maybe people from the community working on this, and that the records related to this process should be public, even if there's some loophole that allows them to be privatized. Haven't we had enough of that at the federal level? It's a little surreal. One other comment about the Winslow planning process, got it, is that I've heard from some of you that the map presented to the Planning Commission contemplates about 4,000 more people in Winslow. I've heard from commissioners that, well, they look at it and it looks like 11,000 people. My only ask is maybe that should be nailed down before the Planning Commission does a lot of work on it. And you're the policymakers and you should tell them what they're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ron Peltier.
Good evening, council members, City Manager King and City Attorney Haney. Hope you're all doing well tonight. I'd like to make a couple of comments about Agenda Item 8B as your discussion on the groundwater management plan for your consideration. You received a memo in your packet for the discussion, and it has a summary of community concerns. And it's one concern, but there are more concerns than just one. And the main concern is the question of whether or not City of Bainbridge Island has a basic conflict of interest when it comes to developing a groundwater management plan. And I'm not saying that to cast aspersions like people are being dishonest and that sort of thing. But if you look at the interest that the city has, it really is in a monetary interest in the expansion of its tax base. And that has to do with development and growth. And it relates directly to a groundwater management plan. There's no reason to have a groundwater management plan if it's not going to be used to inform decisions about planning, long-range planning for land use. One way to remedy that would be to have a peer review of the groundwater management plan. I'd like to just ask that you consider that it would help to remove doubt that there was any bias involved in development of our groundwater management plan. It would add a little expense, but probably wouldn't be that much. Another concern that I think should be added to the list of public concerns has to do with the drawdown of aquifers and of our streams by pumping. That I think doesn't really get stressed enough in your discussions and in the work that is being done on the groundwater management plan. This is really an issue of respecting tribal treaty rights. The Squamish are very interested in what's going on. When we take a lot of water out of shallow aquifers, it impacts stream levels, can impact stream flows in the summer. So I hope you consider those things, and thanks for listening and have a great meeting.
Thank you. Next, Jill McMillan.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Joe McMillan. I've lived here on the island for about 30 years with my family. Thank you for entertaining public comment tonight. I'd like to speak to Agenda Item 8E on your agenda tonight, which involves consideration of a proof of concept agreement with a company called Gen Optic North America And what this proof of concept agreement would apparently set up is a surveillance system and a scheme whereby Genoptic, a private company, is hired on to engage in, to deploy a monitoring system of some sort, and then assist in monitoring line cutting into the ferry line on the 305 approach to the ferry terminal. The draft of this agreement that was included on the agenda does not identify the statement of work, or it doesn't include the statement of work. So it's impossible for me to speak specifically about the technologies and the services that are going to be performed. But the agreement does recite that Genoptic technology is capable of recognizing line cutters as the vehicles maneuver into the ferry line and can provide sufficient information to enable the city's police department to successfully enforce the Washington statute that makes this a traffic violation. Now, I'm not standing up here in defense of line cutters in the ferry line. But what I'm hoping to raise awareness about are two things associated with this contract, this development. One is surveillance, and the other is privatization of law enforcement activity. And both of them are deeply troubling from my perspective. And again, preventing line cutting is the kind of thing that many people, perhaps most, would say, hey, don't worry about it. This is not a big deal. We got this under control. All I'm suggesting is that this is a slippery slope. And once camera technology and surveillance is deployed, it can be used very readily for all kinds of other activities. And the privatization of law enforcement is a historically bad idea. So I'd hope that you'd look very carefully at that contract that's on your agenda tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Melanie Keenan.
Good evening. My name's Melanie, and I'm a geologist and hydrogeologist on the Groundwater Management Plan Subcommittee. It's good to receive some technical information for the Groundwater Management Plan update after asking for 13 months. The subcommittees have been asking to review basic data to substantiate consultant work. It's unfortunate COBE continues to misrepresent subcommittee work used to promote professional standards for the model and reporting in keeping with the scope of work costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. To properly evaluate water resources using well monitoring data, city resources were wasted on modeling water rights unnecessarily. EA consultants are also billing the community for the problematic draft EIS, which fails to follow SEPA guidelines, failed to mention BI as a sole source aquifer, failed to incorporate new Growth Management Act legislation for sole source aquifer islands, and was put together without the groundwater management plan necessary for planning to make adequate environmental assessments. Not having a groundwater management plan in the DEIS is putting the cart before the horse. This is alarming. Staff and consultants have been tailoring the model update to proposed accelerated growth to increase population by 44% over 11,000, well beyond the 4,000 allocated by the GMA, 4,500 actually. The groundwater management plan needs to be completed with the required proper public stakeholder input process as outlined in the project before the final EIS and comp plan update to avoid further problems. Without getting too technical, here are a few concerns in the presentation. 2 slides, document concerning deep Fletcher Bay Aquifer drawdown, Another slide indicates seawater intrusion in 65 years with 5,200 people. Some people say this is not really a problem because I won't live that long. But however, water resource laws require planning to ensure adequate quantity and quality of water in the future. Seawater intrusion is an obvious concern on an island and has been documented all the way back to the 1950s. The mid to high impact shows rising water table in blue at the north end of the island because of sea level rise. What does this mean? Is it drinkable or brackish water? Information about wastewater reuse feasibility is likely out of date because the EPA passed new laws in 2024 for toxic PFAS chemicals that require increased levels of treatment for raw sewage. More laws are expected, so Kobe will need to update their requirements. 2 out of 12 basins on the island are closed to further drilling and water rights. Number 6, we need documentation to validate proposed zero change in aquifer recharge parameters for the next 100 years when the last model update used a decrease of 20%. Subcommittee members look forward to additional data. Citizens also request city officials address ongoing questions concerning the correct numbers for growth based on the new legislation. And we will have to address the stormwater reporting, which is important to complete the plan another time. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next, Malcolm Gander.
Hello, council members. Malcolm Gander, subcommittee member for the Groundwater Management Plan. I wanted to relate a couple statements that were stated by city council members in meetings. One was, the island's going to grow no matter what. Then later in the same meeting, the same person said, it doesn't matter what the reports say because they all say the same thing. And what I wanted to do is unpack that and let's look at historic trends, recent construction. I'd say there's truth in the statement that the island is going to grow no matter what. Now, there was another statement where they said the groundwater management plan is going to stop growth. So many of the elements in the groundwater management plan are going to be discussed tonight in about an hour when Chris Risbecki, the Public Works Director, gives a presentation. There's not going to be any kind of big surprise when the groundwater management plan draft comes out because there are a number of really important points that have to do with money. When we talk about the groundwater management plan, we need to have that information, and the city council needs that information because they control the purse strings. The city manager doesn't, the planning director doesn't. It's up to the 7 city council members because they vote on how the money is spent. So you need tools going forward when we look at documents like the draft groundwater management, the draft environmental impact statement, and the groundwater management plan. And I would like to see the groundwater management plan draft done, reviewed by the public, finalized, and then the conclusions and recommendations be incorporated into the EIS. We're talking about growth, alternatives 1, 2, or 3, that are going to be with us for years. So it's really important that we have tools, and the city council has tools because they're going to be making the decisions with the money. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jonathan Davis.
Good evening, council members. Jonathan Davis, architect and resident on Grove Avenue, or next to Grove Avenue, and I have two comments this evening. First off, I really appreciate the process that is available within the city to bring up issues that we have with code and other regulations within the city, have discussions and review of what the actual implications of the codes are, and then go through a process to make revisions or see if there are appropriate revisions. So I'm talking about the change that you have on your agenda this evening for the revision to the EV charging ordinance. We are involved with the project at Helpline House, as Maria has described, and felt and realized that the current code was somewhat burdensome from a financial point of view, and appreciated having the opportunity to discuss with you how that might be changed and discuss with Planning Commission and also the Climate Action Change Committee and come up with a solution. So, which I think works very well. It provides opportunity for charging at Helpline, but it also makes for a very reasonable cost impact. So I ask you to support the ordinance that is on your agenda for this evening and vote yes to implement that, and with much appreciation. The other issue is something a little closer to home that I want to talk about that's not got to do with my work, but to do with my family and my life here on the island. Is Grove Avenue had a series of traffic calming obstacles put on along its length about a year ago, I believe. And I made some comment originally about how I felt unsafe it was. And I just want to come back and just bring it up again. I think it's a bit of an urban eyesore, these little white candlesticks that run along the side of the road. My kids ride up Grove every day to go to school, and they have to go through the chicanes to get there. And I've been riding my bike up. Someone has passed me and gone through the opposite side of it. Thank you, John. I've also seen delivery vehicles who want to go left. They can't actually make it round the roundabout, so they do an illegal left maneuver through the roundabout. So, and I know that it does not slow traffic. That's a sort of personal observation that I've made, that there's no real need to slow down for it. But I'd ask the city to review that and potentially remove the obstacles on Grove. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there anyone else who is here who didn't sign up but wants to speak? Sure. Oh, sorry. Althea Paulson.
It's okay. You're right.
Hi.
Yes, my name is Althea Paulson. I've been an island resident for almost 30 years. I don't know if Roz and Carl are still here, but I just want to give them a shout out because they've done so much for this community. So that's not what I'm commenting about, but yay for them. I want to speak to the resolution that reaffirms the 2017 welcoming community. I'm a pro bono lawyer at Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center and have been since 2017. So I was thrilled to see that somebody remembered that ordinance and resolution. I was pestering then Councilman Mike Scott, who actually drafted those two pieces of good policy here. And I'm just thrilled that somebody remembered it and brought it forward because it's really good. And I'm assuming and hoping that you'll reaffirm it. I'm still taking cases 8 years later, and I want you to know that we have a waiting list for legal capacity, that we just can't address ever. There's never enough lawyers. There's never enough resources to help the folks who need the help right here in our region. There are immigrants all over Kitsap County and including Bainbridge Island, providing essential work and community contributions, caring for our homes, our businesses, our elders. owning businesses of their own, paying taxes. They are a crucial part of our community. And I'm really excited that we still have this on the books. It doesn't change any law, but it makes a powerful statement for folks who really are under profound threat right now. And so I appreciate that. And then in rereading it, because it's been many years since I've read it, I was pleased to see that the resolution encourages businesses and civic organizations and schools to adopt their own welcoming resolutions. And I also was glad to see the expansive nature of the welcoming in there, specifically another community that's under threat now, the LGBTQ community, specifically transgender and non-binary folks. So it's a good resolution ordinance all the way around. Let's see, I just want to say that if anybody, Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center, my organization, is a good resource for anybody who wants to know anything about their rights, their employee rights, neighbors and friends and so on. So we're a community together and I very much appreciate your work. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, and did we have anyone online? No. All right, with that, public comment is closed. And we will move on to our consent agenda. And Councilmember Moriwaki.
Thank you, Mayor Matthews. I move approval of the consent agenda for the night's meeting as presented.
Okay. Deputy Mayor. Oh,
Thank you, Mayor.
okay, so
I'd like to ask that item 5D, the adoption of the stormwater system plan, be removed from the consent agenda for separate action.
thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I will remove the council agenda, consent agenda with the removal of 5D for future discussion.
Okay, so motion made by Councilmember Moriwaki, seconded by Councilmember Fantroy Johnson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And so now we will move on to 5D, adopt the stormwater system plan. City manager. No, okay.
Okay, here, they want that here.
I will put this. Yes. I move to adopt. Wait a minute. Yes, I move to adopt the stormwater system plan as presented to us in the agenda packet. I'd like to speak to it briefly before a vote.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Motion made by Deputy Mayor Quitsland, seconded by Councilmember Dietz.
I'm just intending to call attention to this very important piece of work. It's uncontroversial, but it is substantive in tandem with the groundwater management plan. They're different documents, but they've worked together. And the stormwater management plan relates to many things in our development regulations, our requirement of low impact design, our attempts to limit clearing, all of the things that we do and will need to do more carefully in the future. So this is a foundation for very good policy. The plan also includes a lot of recommendations. Implementation of the plan is going to cost money. It's going to involve commitments to work that has been delayed, postponed, put off, and is now overdue. Work on our infrastructure for handling groundwater. And it'll be important for the council to pay attention as opportunities arise to act upon the recommendations. And this, of course, will involve staff in public works, will involve the council's deliberation over choices between this or that amount of money, this amount of staff time and so on. So we are laying a foundation with this plan, which we will need to pay attention to, because we can't go forward with plans that are not implemented effectively.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have a motion that's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. And with that, we will go on to council announcements. Councilmember Marwaki.
Thank you, Mayor Matthews. And first, start with, we had no special meeting last week because the Mayor Matthews, Deputy Mayor Quitzland, Councilmember Dietz and I all went down to Olympia together to lobby for an important privacy bill. And I'll allow my colleagues to talk about their experiences, but I want to give a big shout out to Brianna and Amina, our lobbyists who set up a great schedule. And we met with either the members or representatives of Senator Bob Hasagawa, Senator Deborah Kishkanden, Senator Jim McClure, Representative Bob Chase, Representative Dario Farbiar, Representative Kevin Waters, Yasmin Trudeau, and Kevin Walker. And this bill is sponsored by our state representative from the 23rd, Tara Simmons, and Republican Kevin Walker. We met with those folks. Wednesday, I had a meeting with the Public Arts Committee, their annual meeting, talking about moving forward on the Creative District. And on Friday, went to the dedication ceremony. I believe Deputy Mayor Quitzland and Councilmember Dietz was there too. At the welcome poll.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome poll, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lovely thing that the Rotary is doing around the world, where there are 250 of these located in 150 countries. And the one located, it's in Waypoint Park toward the ferry. And it's a tall square pole with 4 different languages on the side, the Shoots, the Filipino, Japanese, and English, talking about peace. And tomorrow, I will be going to Olympia, but Blair King, Manager Blair King is also going to go, and we're going to be talking about House Bill 1765. And what this bill is relating to an issue we had a few years ago, where an individual running for office received the email lists of the people who subscribe to our city newsletter. That individual was informed not to use it for commercial or campaign purposes, but did it anyway. And a lot of people were upset because they thought that their emails given to the city would be used just for that purpose. But the law is not clear on that. And I find this really important because one of the things we really have to do here is earn your trust. And I mentioned this in our first meeting with Senator Bob Hasagawa, that the situation of this was that incident. And also our city's gone through a lot of very difficult changes that they didn't trust us. We went through 4 city managers in 4 years. We had city council members being sued by the public and successfully, and we had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to right their wrongs. And so we want people to know that their emails, when you give them to us, are going to be protected. And this law is very narrow. It only protects the emails, not the addresses and phone numbers are not going to be, not protected, only your emails. And it's for small agencies as well as small cities. It could be the senior center, it could be Helpline House. If you have a newsletter or communications device that has your email, this law will make sure that you know that it's protected, that cannot be used for any other purpose. I think it's a great bill and appreciate the work that's gone into it, especially Councilmember Hytopoulos, who brought this issue forward. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. I participated last week in a special meeting that was co-sponsored by the Association of Washington Cities and the Puget Sound Regional Council. And they were giving an update on the uncertainties that many of us are facing with regards to what grants are going to continue to be available, what funding is going to be available. And so I won't go down, all of the content, but I just want you to know that we are looking very carefully at, and there are resources that can help us figure this out. I mean, the one very sad takeaway is that if you have grants that have been awarded but are not obligated yet, you might not be able to see those grants and move forward with them for the foreseeable future. We don't know how things will turn out. But if they've been obligated, then, you should be able to count on them. So there was someone from the federal level, and there was the senior advisor to Governor Ferguson. The transportation and housing infrastructure aide to Senator Murray. And I'd like to point out too, Mike Wallace from the National League of Cities. I really enjoyed his analysis and felt like he could be a good advocate for cities, or a good place to go for advice. So anyway, a lot of uncertainty, but we're working to figure it all out. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Dietz.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Moriwaki, bringing up our trip to Olympia. And first of all, I wanted to thank you, and I didn't know City Manager Blair King going down tomorrow to speak for that Public Records Act. Thank you for taking the time, because that's basically practically a day easily to go down there. So thank you for that. But you know, our trip that we went, it was good. But it was a full day for us to go down, the number of us who did. But we had a number of excellent discussions. Interesting enough, outside of Senator Hasagawa, all the legislators were Republican. I recall. I don't know if that was just by coincidence, but found a lot when it comes down to some grassroots levels of issues, and particularly like public records, public trust. There was a lot of we got very positive reception from all the legislators. So we'll see. Last thing I just want to say is I have my office hours this Saturday, 10 to noon at Cups Espresso. So feel welcome to come by. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Matthews. Activities since the January 28th meeting, there has been a lot going on. I've been energized and very happy to participate in a lot of things. Some of it is social activity, not political or not the business of the council directly, but still worth mentioning. There was a planning commission meeting on the 30th of January, and another meeting that's coming up on the Thursday of this week. Any of you who are interested in the comprehensive plan development, it's there in public. The Planning Commission has primary responsibility at this stage in the process for very much of the working out of details and working with what's received from planning staff and from consultants. The Planning Commission has not been told what to do or asked to sign on onto a program. They've done a lot of deep searching, and that will continue. Also, eventually, decisions have to be made on both Winslow and the comprehensive plan. So I see the opportunities for some collaboration and cooperation and communication between the council and the Planning Commission at this time. I'll look forward to involvement in that. Other meetings. There was a program sponsored by the Housing Resources Board. It ended up on Zoom because the roads were not very open on the date of this, the evening of February 5th. But 3 young architects, 1 from Seattle and 2 from Portland, talked about very innovative planning for affordable housing, co-op building and mid-scale, not high density, but use of very efficient use of land and opportunities. I attended the Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Board meeting on the 6th of February, and those meetings are worth following. They're available to the public and especially available to council members and planning commission members. That's where the certification process for comprehensive plans takes place. And as we see that process going forward, we can learn what how our own comprehensive plan will be reviewed in due time and what we're preparing for. So those meetings have been very informative for me, and I hope to share the perspective from those meetings with other people. There was a historical society meeting on the 8th of February recently. The Historical Society's plans for expansion of the History Museum being designed by John Paul Jones, the local architect who has done so much across the island over the years. And that's going to be ambitious. It will be a huge contribution to the cultural life of the city, building on the achievements of the Historical Society and the History Museum going forward. That's an asset that everyone can take advantage of, and it attracts people from all over the country and in fact all over the world. Tomorrow I'll be going in Councilmember Marawalki's place to the Senior Center annual meeting. I can go on my own rationale as well as a member, but this will be for anyone starting at 10:30 tomorrow. And again, that's another institution that serves our community well. And the council and city government are just involved in providing a frame of reference and coordination for all of these things.
Okay, hey, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'll go quickly. I attended the Growth Management Policy Board this past Thursday, and I think it's something the public should look at, those that have been really interested in this process. There are 3 jurisdictions, I think, so far that have turned in their comp plans and had comment letters written on them. And the comment letters are like 10 pages full of detail and really good stuff, things that they're looking for. And so that will help us as we start to frame ours. And they even talk about, they're a little bit lenient on time, and they're asking folks, don't rush to turn them in if just because you want to apply for funding, take your time, maybe get it in the spring. Or so I think those things are important to hear. Let's see, Rep. Nance had a Fix Our Ferries event here in City Hall last Saturday that was full and really well attended, lots of great ideas. The ferry commission or ferry advisory group here needs a Bainbridge Island representative. So that's something we'll have to work on. And REAC was postponed until this Friday because of the snowstorm. Planning Commission's hard at work. I had the opportunity to go to a Bainbridge Schools Foundation gala on Saturday, and I couldn't believe it. There were so many young people I've never seen before on this island. So it was just like a room of hundreds of, I would say, like 28 to 45-year-olds who hide. I mean, it was just like a new world. So wherever you folks are hiding, please come engage with us and let us know how you'd like your community to be shaped. And we had an employee recognition event on Friday night at Kiana Lodge for city employees. That was great. Thank you, Blair. And just really well attended, great food. And we also had, there's something so in Olympia, we had a dinner. Our last thing was a dinner that we had at our lobbyist's home, and it was 3 of us. And we did high-low, which is like, if you've ever watched the Kardashians peak and pit, like what's the good part of your day and what's the bad? And my day today was probably my peak of this maybe whole experience. I got to go to the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Center and go to a graduation for 30 new officers from all over the state of Washington. The city of Bainbridge Island had one officer, Officer Christian Dogue, and it was just such a special event. If you can ever get there, I would really, really encourage my colleagues to go. When we talk about having a welcoming and inclusive city, that includes our officers, and making them feel part of the fold and part of the family is just as important as all of us. And it was really cool to be there, but it was also really cool because Christian was a rock star and he won stuff. He was the one out of all of the other 30 elect or vote on a member who they would have as their backup. or who they, and that was just, they chose him. And he also came in second for something. And it was just, it was really, really beautiful. And his family was from Hawaii and Hilo, and he was probably the best decked out. He had leis. And so I took one for, I got to put one on for a picture, and then they gave it to me because they said, in Hawaii, you don't return gifts. And so this is like the most beautiful lei, and I will treasure this. So it was just a really, really special day. So thanks, Chief, for letting us know, and I look forward to more of those in the future. Okay. To our city manager's report. Oh, sorry about that. Councilmember Morawaki.
Hi.
Oh. Yes. Did you have, sorry, Kirsten, did you?
I was waiting to hear if anybody talked about the employee dinner. Did I miss
That's
that?
what I said.
You did it? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Then I must have, I was listening. Okay. You did it.
It was really good.
Well, I'll just add, since I wasted everybody's time, to say that was a wonderful experience. I'm so glad that the city manager has introduced that for us to actually spend time with staff and appreciate them. So I've
Yes. And just to amplify that, congratulations to the city manager. This is something you've initiated, and it's a boosted city morale, and we give honor to people who served, including the people we just honored tonight. And I'm sorry that Councilmember Fauntleroy Johnson, you weren't able to join us because it was a really cool video, little shot of us together. Our goofy pictures, yeah. We can hold that as blackmail or something, but yeah, okay.
Okay, city manager's report.
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor to the council, there are two items I would like to bring to your attention. One is a memorandum that's included in your agenda packet. That memorandum addresses some direction that you've given staff, given me to conduct, and that is a youth engagement. We are engaged in developing a plan for youth engagement in response to the city council request. Earlier in the school year, in the fall of 2024, our equity and inclusion manager made presentations to students at Bainbridge High School, Eagle Harbor, and Hile High School with a focus on sophomores, juniors, and seniors to discuss the city and the municipal corporation and to talk about interest in that. That is being followed up with a meeting in the spring, probably March or April, where students and members of Kobe staff and council will come together in a focus group setting to talk about what the interests and needs of students, high school students in our community are. The intention of that particular focus group meeting is not the end to itself, but the means to an end. The means in the end is a larger event, a larger discussion, perhaps a larger youth day, to talk about how we can engage students on a regular basis in Bainbridge Island. As the mayor alluded to in her comments, that seems to be a missing demographic from us in our council meetings, public comments, and other ways. And the council's wanted us to be more responsive to youth in the community, and I wanted to give you an update on that. The second item I have is I'd like the police chief to come forward. There's also a memorandum in your agenda packet, and we have some year-end statistical information from the police department comparing police activity and performance measurements to 2024 to 2023, and the chief is going to mention that for just 2 to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Council. Joe Clark, Chief of Police. Thank you for this time. I just wanted to give a brief overview of the annual report that you have in our package. While that report reflects 2024 compared to 2023, I wanted to note that internally, when we look at these numbers, we're also looking at 5-year and 10-year trends, to see how we are in relation to time. I'll start with crime. Overall, we're flat compared to last year, to the previous year. There was a difference of 2 reported incidents. The trends we're seeing, property crime has continued to fall since 2022 by about 34%. Last year was down about 13.5% from the previous year. That's been driven by a reduction in vandalism reports and fraud reports. Those are down around pre-pandemic levels. Theft overall remains down from the peak in 2022. We had 193 reported incidents versus 304 in 2022. Motor vehicle theft, we had 19 cars stolen last year. That is above our 10-year average of about 14, but still below the peak of 30 stolen cars in 2022. So this is where I take a minute for my public service announcement. Please lock your cars. Please take the keys out of your cars. Doors and windows all should be locked. We live in a safe community, but I'd like to keep it that way. When we look at crimes against persons, we're up by about 19 reports. The driver there has been violations of no contact orders and some intimidation reports. Misdemeanor assault reports are up from last year, but still consistent with our 5 and 10-year trends. I think what is important to note here, these offenses in nearly all cases involve persons known to each other. Looking at our traffic work, collisions were slightly down. We had 182 collisions last year compared to 192 in the previous year. Our impaired driving arrests were up by 1. We had 27 last year. Traffic citations issued are about down by a third. We had 283 issued citations last year. And similarly with parking tickets, there were 331 issued last year, which is a little more than half than the year before. Both of these metrics are directly related to our staffing. I'm sure you know we lost our parking enforcement officer last year at the midpoint of the year to retirement. And in terms of our patrol staffing, we started the year with 3 vacancies. And through the course of the year, we found 3 candidates and hired all 3, the last of which graduated this morning. And that combined with extended medical absences over the course of the year, we were essentially down in terms of loss of productivity by 4 positions. It takes about a year to get someone hired and get someone fully trained to where they're working independently. At the end of March, 2 of those hires will be out working on their own. And then later in the summer, today's graduate will be out working on his own as well. So those do have a direct impact, particularly, in citations issued. In terms of our professional staff, in addition to the parking enforcement officer, we lost 2 other employees, 1 to retirement and 1 who returned to a career as a commercial airline pilot. We were very happy. We hated to see her go, but we were very happy for her in the long run. 2 of those positions have been filled. Our parking enforcement officer is out working and chalking those tires. And we are in the background phase of that final professional staff position and should be on board by the end of the month. 2 additional things I just wanted to point out. Public records requests, we had 623 requests last year. That's an increase of 10%. It took us 442 hours to fulfill those requests, which was a 23% increase over the year before. We are getting increasingly requests for video, and the time that it takes to review those videos is extensive. Our community health navigator had 300 referrals to resources. Primarily behavioral health services are sought. Our use of force incidents, we had 8 as opposed to 2 in the previous year. And complaints against officers, we had 5 compared to 9 the previous year. And I think that covers the overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. And that concludes City Manager's report.
Thank you, City Manager. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to regular business. And first item is reaffirming Resolution 2017-09, Bainbridge Island's Welcoming and Inclusive City Resolution and Ordinance 2017-06 related to community policing. And first, Councilmember Morawaki is going to read the Welcoming and Inclusive City Ordinance Resolution, and then I'll read the Community Policing Ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor Matthews. And quick comment, this is something that our city council 7 years ago wrote. It's extremely well written. And if you think what happened 7 years ago, I guess we're on fascism 2.0. Muslims being rushed to the airports and deported. And our community said we didn't want to have any part of that. And so I really applaud our council from that past to write this exceptional resolution. Resolution number 2017-09, Bainbridge Island Welcoming and Inclusive City Resolution. A resolution of the City Council, the City of Bainbridge Island, Washington, affirming that Bainbridge Island is a welcoming and inclusive city that respects the fundamental human dignity of all people. Whereas all people, including persons of all races, creeds, colors, national origins, sexes, sexual orientation, gender identities, gender expressions, mental abilities, and physical abilities, are respected and valued members of our community and are vital to our shared health and welfare. And whereas Bainbridge Island has long been recognized as a hospitable and welcoming community where diverse people, families, and institutions thrive, the contributions of all are celebrated and valued. And whereas Bainbridge Island's inclusive culture and values enhance our cultural fabric, economic growth, and overall well-being for current and future generations. And whereas we remember our history, including the oppression of indigenous people and the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, and we vow as a community, Nidoto Nayoni, let it not happen again. And whereas Bainbridge Island was the first community in the United States during World War II where, under a dark cloud of racial prejudice, fear, and uncertainty, and a shameful lack of political leadership, Japanese Americans were rolling exiled from the West Coast. Yet the majority of members of our community believed in the fundamental constitutional rights and protections for all, stood by their friends and neighbors, and refused to succumb to bigotry and hatred. And whereas Bainbridge Island is committed to continuing to build an inclusive and safe community where all persons are fully accepted, integrated, and protected. And whereas community efforts that promise understanding and collaboration between our native-born and foreign-born community members are crucial in encouraging and preserving Bainbridge Island's welcoming environment. And whereas Bainbridge Island encourages our businesses, civic groups, schools, government agencies, and other community institutions to undertake their own initiatives beyond this resolution to make Bainbridge Island a welcoming place for new residents from other countries and an inclusive community for all people. Whereas Bainbridge Island is a place of sanctuary for targeted communities and persecuted peoples, a city that opposes hate and bias and acts of intolerance committed against our neighbors, and a city that vows to cultivate and support a culture of compassion, kindness, and protection. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Bainbridge Island does resolve as follows. The City of Bainbridge Island is a welcoming and inclusive city that embraces all residents and visitors regardless of race, creed, color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, mental ability, and physical ability, a city that strives for unity and harmony in our community, and a city that respects the essential human dignity of all people. Passed by the City Council on the 14th day of February 2017, approved by the Mayor this 14th day of February 2017, Val Tollefson, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I'll go ahead and read ordinance number 2017-06, an ordinance of the City of Bainbridge Island, Washington relating to community policing. Whereas on February 14th, 2017, the City Council adopted resolution number 2017-09, affirming that the City of Bainbridge Island is a welcoming and inclusive city that respects the fundamental human dignity of all people. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Bainbridge Island, Washington does ordain as follows. Section 1, immigrant status information. Unless required by law or court order, no City of Bainbridge Island Police Department officer or employee shall inquire into the immigration status or nationality of any person or engage in activities designed to ascertain the immigration status or nationality of any person. The Bainbridge Island Police Department shall not investigate, arrest, or detain any person based solely on immigration status or nationality. The Bainbridge Island Police Department shall maintain policies consistent with this section. Effective date, this ordinance shall take effect and be enforced 5 days from its passage, approval, and publication as required by law. And it was passed by our City Council this 21st day of February 2017, and it was approved by then Mayor Val Tollefson. And Councilmember Dietz.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and make the recommended motion. I move to reaffirm Resolution 2017-09, Bainbridge Island's Welcoming and Inclusive City Resolution 2017-09, and Ordinance 2017-06 relating to community policing.
A second.
Motion made by Councilmember Dietz, seconded by Councilmember Fantroy Johnson.
I'd like to speak to the motion.
Okay.
Just want to comment that, again, this was well written by our council members, but also our staff. And I've spent decades writing resolutions, and these are well-written words. And I hope all of you agree they're powerful words, but without action, they're just words. And I was thinking about one word that I mentioned earlier, fascism. And we are approaching that. And who has a better appreciation of that than the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum? And in that museum, they have this poster you can buy. I used to carry it in my wallet. They've had it there for decades. It has this, it looks like this. It's called the Early Warning Signs of Fascism. And if I may just read these 14 points, Mayor. The early warning signs of fascism: powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government intertwined, corporate power protected, labor power suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, fraudulent elections. I just ask you to all consider how many of these things we're checking off. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councilmember Dietz.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and thank you, Councilmember Morawaki, for that. And I just want to say, you know, this community, this council, we are not backing down from our principles of equity. And this, I'll just say, some things in the news. This is not the time for capitulation by any jurisdiction. So that is not us as a council, not us as a community, and I think you can count on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dietz. Okay, we had a motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Now we will move on to discussing the groundwater management plan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. At your January 21st study session, a presentation was made on the work to date related to the groundwater management plan. Subsequent to that meeting, the council indicated an interest to continue and receive more information, specifically responses to questions that were raised during that study session. This report is intended to continue that discussion and address some of the questions that were raised. Chris Wierzbicki is here to provide the follow-up. He is going to be joined by our new project manager from EA, Luke Flores. And Luke will be joining us, I believe, probably remotely. Upon the acceptance or the review of the information, I do want to just mention something that I have heard from individual council members and was mentioned by the public, the opportunity, or should the city engage in some type of peer review of the draft document when it comes out before it becomes final. If that is an interest of the council, that is probably something that I would like to receive direction on sooner than later, to let us give us the time needed to identify a qualified firm and also to identify what costs might be involved with that. And with that, Chris Wierzbicki can make the presentation.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Council. Chris Wierzbicki, Public Works Director. As the City Manager mentioned, we're going to give you just a brief update on the groundwater management plan and attempt to provide you a little bit more information on some of the questions you asked at our meeting back on January 21st of this year. These are the questions that we're going to go over. There's 6 of them. I won't read them because we're going to go over them individually. The first question was about explaining the population projections that went into the groundwater model and how they were developed. Well, as you might know or remember, we have 3 different population projections: a low, medium, and a high, and they are all based on trends in population growth over the last 35 years since Bainbridge Island became a city in 1991. The low population growth projection is based on the lowest growth rate in the last 35 years or so. That was between 2012 and 2023, about 212 people a year. The high population growth projection is based on the highest growth rate that we've had in this last 35 or so years. between 1991 and 2007, when we had about 419 people per year. And the median population is just the median of those two, about 315 people per year. When you project those population growths out to 100 years, and the low growth scenario, you can see in 100 years, the population would be about 46,000. So a little under twice the population we currently have, which is about 25,000. The median growth projection would put that population growth at 100 years a little above double our current population growth at 56, almost 57,000. And the high growth scenario would max out the 100-year population at about 70,000, so almost 3 times our current population. And if you look at the chart here, this is one that we've looked at in previous slides, you can see that the high growth scenario also includes a ramp up of the in the first 20 years to the maximum population that's identified in the maximum scenario of your sub-area planning, so about 11,500 people. So you can see that there's kind of like a bit of a bend there at the 20-year mark where we're ramping up to that population. So in 20 years, that would mean that we'd have about 36,500 people. If you drop down to the orange bar there, you'll see that the median growth population in 20 years would be about 31,200, or an increase of about 6,000 people in 20 years. Even that median population growth is about double the population growth that we've seen in the past 20 years. So in the last 20 years, we've seen about an increase of about 3,500 people. So this would be even doubling the population growth we've seen in the past 20 years. So that's the population projection. There was also a question about priority watersheds and how groundwater impacts watersheds and what we might do about that and how the plan will address them. So as a commenter mentioned, there are already, kind of looking back, 2 basins on Bainbridge Island that are quote unquote closed by the Department of Ecology. And that was something that was done back in the 1980s. The reason why we said that there could be restrictions on water rights or individual wells in these locations is that Department of Ecology has not enforced these closures on Bainbridge Island. There are a lot of closed basins around the state. They have prioritized their the enforcement actions that they're taking on closed basins, and these 2 basins have never, as far as we know, had any action taken on them. But our folks who are working on a groundwater management plan identified these, and they are going to be identified in the groundwater management plan as a place where maybe this, at the local level, we want to take some action about how to enforce the regulations that the state has not been enforcing in these locations. In addition to that, as we've talked about previously, there are 2 watersheds that are identified as priorities for looking forward as related to the groundwater model. One of them overlaps with one of those closed basins. That's the Fletcher Bay Basin there on the left. The other one there on the right is the what's called the North Eagle Harbor, a portion of the North Eagle Harbor Basin. These are both places where we have production wells and where groundwater contributions to streams will have some decreases over this if the population grows as we're predicting. The thing about the groundwater model, though, is that it can't model everything related to streams. And I think we've mentioned this before. It can only tell us about the groundwater contributions to surface water. It can't tell us about runoff. It can't tell us about water quality. It can't tell us about habitat. So part of the purpose of the groundwater management plan actions will be to potentially invest some money in some further monitoring of these locations so we can determine exactly what's happening here, what's contributing to potential environmental degradation, what can we do about it. Next, some information about water usage trends and its relationship to population growth. There's a kind of a longer explanation about this in the memo that went into your packet that I'm not going to get into all the details of, but just at the highest level, some information about population. As we've talked about a couple minutes ago, over the past 10 years or so, we've seen about a 1% or so increase in population per year. And we've also, we have pretty good data on how much water gets used because we have information on people's meters and we send bills to folks. So in the 3 largest water systems on the island, the public water systems, residential water use has increased about 2% per year. So only 1% more than population increases. And so in the groundwater model itself, in this this next slide, I don't expect you to understand all the detail here. There's a lot. Basically, we're trying to impress upon you that the groundwater management team is doing a lot of background research to try to mimic as closely as possible the existing conditions that we have today, so that the forecasting work that's done in the model can be as accurate as possible. For example, the population projections that are going into the model are spatially distributed in the model based on the existing populations of the island. They're cross-referenced with the water systems that they use today and associated with the amounts and types of water usage in each of those systems. So this chart just gives you one snapshot of the timeframes and the different water systems that are being evaluated and the different metrics that are going into the building of this model to try to make it as accurate as possible.
A quick question, right? Just really, the total production, it just says total production and it's in tenths and numbers. Total production of what? How many gallons? What does that total production, those numbers mean?
I think that's in gallons per day, but I'd have to confirm that. Make note. Let's see. Next question. Oop, let me go back. Next question was about potential wastewater beneficial reuse projects and how that would impact groundwater. So you're getting a little bit of a preview. We're going to have a much more in-depth discussion of this topic at your next council meeting on February 18th, where our consultant who's been working on the beneficial reuse plan will be here to tell you more about the results of that study. The information I'm just providing you here today is that just to tell you that we have evaluated groundwater recharge areas that are in close proximity to our wastewater treatment plant to figure out if there are places where we could recharge water. You can see all the little color areas on this map identify different potential recharge locations, with kind of blue being the least and purple and red being the highest potential recharge areas. If we zoom in a little bit closer into the area around Sakai Park, this is an area that the study goes into a little bit deeper and identifies that there could be some potential recharge locations around Sakai Park, which is an undeveloped parcel where the city owns a piece and also the parks owns property there as well. So this is more, again, we'll be providing some more information about how groundwater recharge could potentially play out in this scenario on February 18th. Let's see, the next question was about how can the groundwater management plan tell us about aquifer impacts and management strategies? So what you're looking at here is kind of the mid-level scenario in the 20-year and the 100-year impacts from the modeling. And at the 20-year horizon, we can see this is the Fletcher Bay aquifer. So this is the deep aquifer that the city uses to supply water in the Winslow area. At the 20-year horizon, we appear to have a sustainable result. We can see there's no saltwater intrusion. The groundwater levels are lowering because we are using more water in the future, but not to a point where we would not be able to extract water from our existing wells, and not to a depth that we wouldn't be able to access water. In the post-20-year horizon, again, this is the 100-year map, you can start seeing the drawdown around those three wells there around the center of the island in the yellow area, because they're all in close proximity to each other. And one of the recommendations for the post-20-year horizon would be to look at trying to decentralize our groundwater pumping out further into the island, so that we can avoid the overlapping impacts of wells that are close together. Will this prevent drawdown over time? It may prevent the seriousness of drawdown, but it will also help us to spread out how we're drawing water from our aquifers across the island. If we look at the sea level aquifer, which is a kind of a more medium depth aquifer, again, the 20-year horizon appears sustainable. We don't have seawater intrusion. We're some drawdown, but again, not to levels that would be at crisis level. But in the post-20-year horizon, again, here we're looking at 100 years, you can see that there's significant drawdown around the single well that is that we have that draws water from the sea level aquifer at the head of the bay. And so one of the recommendations will likely be to explore interties with other systems that use this aquifer, so that we can reduce the pressure on individual wells and spread that out in a more decentralized way. And so related to that are some other considerations for you to think about, and that the team is thinking about as we develop the plan. And one is that the groundwater model can't tell us exactly what's going to happen in the future, because as I've mentioned before, the plan, the modeling decreases with inaccuracy the farther you go out and the deeper you go down into the ground. And so, and in addition to that, things like water rights are not considered in the plan. So if you look at this chart, we know that the water rights that we have, at least that the city has to support our water system, are good until about the high growth scenario at the 20 to 25 year range. So that's, if you look at that chart, it's somewhere around that looks like maybe 38,000 people or something like that in the next 20 years. If we were to see that many people in the 20, 25 years, we would start approaching the end of our available water rights. Now, we can apply for additional water rights, but we have no guarantees about whether we'll be able to receive those rights or not. We don't have control over that. So that's, one benchmark that we should be looking at when we look at impacts. Another benchmark to be thinking about is water infrastructure. If you think back to the map that we just looked at that showed the big red circle around the head of the bay well, part of the reason for all the significant drawdown on that well is because the model can't predict that there's going to be more infrastructure to draw water from the ground from. So all of the water that needs to be produced in the 100-year scenario has coming from a single well in a single location, which is not a realistic scenario in the 100-year. It's not realistic that we would have that sort of infrastructure in 100 years. In addition to that, if you look at the top of this slide, right now we have, that's our new water tank there. It's almost halfway built. It's 2 million gallons. And then the KPUD has two 1 million gallon tanks approximately that serve the two other large water systems on the island. If we were going to serve a population of 70,000, we would need to build 4 more 2 million gallon tanks, plus replace the 2 million gallon tank we have and build 2 more 1 million gallon tanks because they'd be at the end of their serviceable life in 75 years. So we're talking about significant infrastructure to be able to provide the type of water that would service 70,000 people, and infrastructure that's not taken into account when we're looking at the model. One last consideration is that the groundwater plan can help us, again, identify these benchmarks that can help us do planning work. It can help us identify potential system limits. For example, if we look at this is that same population chart again. If you look at the circle there, that is the high growth scenario in the 60 to 65 year time frame. So let's assume that we have, I think that shows somewhere around 53,000 people in the 65-year time frame. If we were to be servicing that population with the infrastructure we have today, we would be seeing, most likely, start seeing the impacts of saltwater intrusion. So there's a benchmark there that we don't want to hit and that we want to be able to plan for and be able to mitigate for. And again, we're talking about that's more than double the population in the next 50 to 60 years, and way beyond the water rights that we have to serve the population at this point. So again, these are the types of information that will be available in the plan when it's completed. The schedule right now is for us to, we are planning some subcommittee meetings here in the near future to be able to answer some questions in the near term this month and be able to have them review the draft and respond to their comments in early April. Our goal is to bring the draft to the council, hopefully on the May 6th City Council meeting for your comments, and also to be able to talk about potential engagement strategies at that point. So that concludes my report. Thank you. As I mentioned, as the city manager mentioned, Luke Flores, our project manager, is here. If there are questions that come up during your discussion, we'd be happy to have him try to answer those for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. First, Councilmember Haitopoulos, then Councilmember Marwaki, and then Councilmember Deeds.
I want to first just ask a couple questions about what we're hearing tonight, and then I'm going to want another opportunity to speak when we're done with that. But my 2 questions about what we just heard, I might have 3. One would be why the watersheds were closed by the state, if we know anything about that, and whether we're going to learn anything more about that. Also wondering if it's correct that we're not looking at, there's no private wells included, it looks like, in the graph that is telling us what our what residential water usage is. So that's interesting since, of course, on a well, you have a lot less incentive to conserve. So I wanted to understand if that's correct. And then if that's just for the purposes of this presentation, but we are considering any private well usage in any manner in the modeling. And then my last question is in answering the question, and maybe it's a comment, but in answering the question about what can the groundwater management tell us about aquifer impacts and management, which might have been related to something I asked, that's probably the closest thing to questions that I asked. I noticed that we're now not looking at images of the concerning impacts on the Fletcher Bay aquifer. So I guess it's a comment, but now we're looking at a higher level aquifer, which has a little less of an alarming impact than the more than 100-foot decreases and 80 to 100-foot decreases in the areas around the Kobe wells. So that kind of concerns me because we've been seeing those images and talking about that through multiple presentations, and now they're not being shown. And then, like I said, I do have some comments and probably motions.
So through the chair, here are the questions that I heard right now is that why did the state close the particular areas? That was one question. And were there no private wells considered in the modeling? And then the third question was there a change in an aquifer that we've identified and referring to from previous presentation? Is that, no, not on the third question.
It's not a question. I'm just saying we are no
say-
longer looking for some reason at the Fletcher Bay aquifer.
And perhaps then either through Mr. Worsvicki or Mr. Flores going to respond to those questions.
Luke, I'm going to take a stab at it and then I may have you follow up if that's all right. Because I don't know the answer to number one. So maybe, I don't know if you do either, but that's something we could come back to if we don't know the answer, but I'll forward that one to Luke. On the second question, yes, private wells are considered in that chart that had all the numbers and figures in it. Private wells that are monitored are included in the groundwater model, and the expansion of those wells as it relates to population growth is also included in the modeling as well. And with regards to the aquifer, we did include the Fletcher Bay aquifer maps in this presentation. We included sea level and Fletcher Bay in this presentation. So, Luke, is there anything you'd like to expand upon? I don't know if you know more about those basin closures or not. Probably not.
I do not know.
Anything you'd like to add?
No, you summarized it well. Private individual wells are being simulated in the model, and all aquifers are still being modeled and evaluated. I mean, they weren't shown in this presentation, but that is available and will be a part of the groundwater management plan.
Thank you. So we'll follow up on the basic closure item.
Thank you. Councilmember Murwaki.
Thank you, Mayor Matthews. My questions are going to deal with the graphs, and I don't have numbers on the slides, but they're the ones about population growth. You had a red line, a green line for high growth, red line for medium growth, and low growth on the blue bottom. And if I heard you say correctly, even at the low growth, that's still higher. I think you said double of what we have been experiencing historically. So I'd like to see maybe if there could be that line that is actually reflecting our historical trends. And there are two other graphs that had to do with, where are they? The the approximate limit of the current water rights. The only circle was the ultra high projection. I'd like to have an idea of the other two models. I'm just looking at the graph, and if that's the thing, it looks like the low deal is out 75 or 80 years, but I'm just eyeballing it on this chart. So my question is, those other two models, the medium growth and low growth, what is their timeline? What is their horizon of when the water rights are going to be in danger there? And the last one was the system limits. Kind of same question. It's only listing the higher one. It looks like, at least on, again, my layperson eyeballing, that the low projection goes way out past a century. So I just need some clarification on those graphs. Thank you.
So through the chair there, what we heard was that with the population growth lines, is there a growth line that is more similar to the growth that we've experienced in terms of, is there other limits to the water rights use and then the system limits going out, and perhaps Mr. Worsvicki could answer those.
Sure. So on the first point on population growth, no, we don't have a chart that represents the point that I was making, which was in the last 20 years, we've had about a to 3,500 population increase, and our low population growth rate is right now double that. We don't have something below that at this point. In terms of the limits of water rights and system limits and other growth scenarios, I'm not sure if Luke could maybe answer those questions or not. We kind of picked some examples of things so that we could tell you about the types of benchmarks and impacts that we're going to be listing in the groundwater management plan, but I don't know if we have all that information at the top of hand. Luke, I don't know if you have any further thoughts on those two.
At least in regard to water rights being reached under different growth scenarios, it's a little, I mean, if I'm looking at the graph on my screen, so it's hard to show, but basically you can extend the line out. So it represents a population which can be, relates to a pumping rate. You can extend that out, and when it intersects the low and the median growth line, you then go down, and then the time, the year in the future, that would be the time at which those growth scenarios would be projected to hit the current water rights of the island.
That confused me more, actually.
I apologize.
Might be a good follow-up answer.
Did you get it? Okay, all right. Well, it was on the graph.
Councilmember Dietz.
Oh, well, thank you, Mayor. Well, let's see, maybe comments, and I will have a question in here, but first off, the water tank infrastructure, I'll just say, we're spending what, $20 million plus on our current water tank, and seeing here that serving a population of 70,000 people, I'm looking for the chart, would require at least 4 more of these sort of tanks. This is incredibly expensive. I mean, this one tank is really expensive for us. It was as much as the police station. And I just want to make the comment that I don't see how we can afford this, this amount of infrastructure. So to me, you're sort of hitting a wall. There's the wall, the concern of water, but then how can we afford to do this infrastructure, albeit we're talking about the future. So I see that as very concerning and for us to be aware. Second, let me just say before I did want to say this beginning, this is a great bit of information. In fact, I'll just say, Chris and Blair, this is the best package of information I have seen on the groundwater management plan for a non-scientist, for someone who just wants to understand it. Great charts, great data. Frankly, I'm still processing it. So the page on information on water use trends, I am seeing, okay, there's population goes up 1% per year and our usage is going up 2%. That's concerning. Why is our usage going up greater than our percentage? And I am seeing that particular areas, South Bainbridge has the highest water use. And I have heard from KPUD that in fact, South Bainbridge has the highest water use per household of anywhere in the county. So this kind of gets back to a theme I've been bringing up, is that we have to start reversing this trend of water wastage. And this groundwater management plan, once this is completed, I want us to have a conversation. How can we reverse the trend of water wastage? So as a question, maybe Luke and Chris, this data refers to Bainbridge Island average household use. I would like to see it compared to average household use in the county. So could that information be provided? Maybe ask KPUD for that. So thank you.
Oh, through the chair, first of all, in terms of the issue with regard to water infrastructure, although this is a groundwater management plan to determine what the yield over time can be, or what a sustained yield in terms of water extraction, I think the purpose of including the infrastructure slide was to say that as an adjunct, even if there is adequate water, there's a significant amount of infrastructure that would be required to service an increased population, even if water is there. And then the request that, and I'd ask for either Mr. Rosvicki to respond to, is should the standard of comparison not be the average consumption in terms of average water in Bainbridge Island, but in the county was the request, I think, that we heard. And I don't know how valid that measurement would be, though.
Yeah, we can certainly get that information from KPUD and provide that comparison. We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to expound a little bit on this water usage going up as well. So over 30 years ago, I was living in Seattle and there was a water shortage, probably due to drought and snowpack or whatever. I don't remember, but I just remember it being a big deal. And then I remember Seattle residents really responded well. And then even after we were sort of out of that drought period, water usage didn't go back up as fast. It was like our habits had shifted, and I don't know where they are now, but I'm wondering in sort of our comparisons to Kitsap County, I also like the idea that we would look at water usage there, but also over maybe even to our Seattle areas. Why are we at twice the water usage per population? And it seems like that's where we have the biggest levers of control. And we need to start doing that now before we draw down our deep aquifers and all. And so first of all, the question is, do we have any idea why we have 2% water growth and only 1% population growth? And I know that we've started a little bit of public education on irrigation measures, but you know, this kind of behavior has been influenced in the past. Is the increase just because of a lack of attention to the importance of it or the lack of public education? Is there any assumptions built into this about why we have such high water usage as compared to population growth? Thank you.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor, and then Councilmember Panfrey Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Matthews. I've listened to the questions raised. We all share the same concerns about what the data tells us, how best to interpret it. We've gotten a great deal of information even before getting the draft of the big project. How can all of this information be best used in the planning that we have already undertaken? What's the relevance? I believe there's a feeling on the part of some people, science will tell us what to do and what not to do. So science will tell us whether to accept the growth that we are being urged or obliged to plan for. I don't think it's that simple. I think we have present day problems that require present day and ongoing attention. We have an acute shortage of housing. And that has driven the value of existing housing higher and higher. We have an acute shortage of housing for a large portion of our workforce and and the people who contribute to Bainbridge Island. The thinking about population growth seems to be diametrically opposed to the thinking about a welcoming and inclusive city. I don't understand this conflict. We're scared of change, and yet we want to welcome people with open arms and say, we love you, we accept you, we want maybe we want to control the welcoming in some fashion, strategically for our own purposes. It doesn't make sense to me. I think we should be thinking about our present needs, and we should recognize that we are not planning for 50 years from now. We are not setting something in motion that will be a train going forward, as the graphs suggest. The graphs are suggesting that's all hypothetical. We can think reasonably 10 years and 20 years out. That's what we do in our planning. We make a 20-year plan and we make another plan in 10 years. We can reflect on what has happened. We can learn from more information about our water systems. That's what we have to do in a step-by-step fashion. Growth will happen. We want to control growth in favor of our greatest needs and try to manage the growth that the market delivers contrary to our needs. So I'm talking about the utility and the value. There's tremendous value. I'm not disallowing anything in our information about the groundwater management program. I'm just asking people to think about how to apply it, and how to understand our present situation and our nearby future.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Fentress Johnson.
I have some questions. Thank you for your presentation, Chris. And I guess the one question I have is for those closed aquifers. Do we know how much is in there? That's one question. I'm gonna ask a couple more. It's just, and you talked about one of the things that we could do instead of doing the Fletcher Bay aquifer is to maybe work with KPUD on some of their, and when I look at that, I mean, it's still drawing the same water out of the island. So I don't really see that as an option, I guess. What it looks like to me is that, you know, we will always be an island, and we will always rely on what water we have here. I don't foresee us building 4 more infrastructure wells to, you know, try to help us with the growth that's coming. And yeah, I can see on your graph that eventually those 3 lines will merge if you go out far enough. But by then it will just probably be too late. So I just had the one question then, and the rest were comments.
So summarizing in terms of what we've heard recently is, I'm going to say, do we know why, is there any apparent reason why we have a higher level of water consumption than, say, other comparable cities like Seattle? My working assumption is that we do not have an obvious or apparent reason why we have a higher level of water consumption. There were several statements made, but also then the question was, do we know how much water capacity is being held in the closed aquifers? And that would be a question.
And I guess I forgot the one other thing. Is there, I don't know if this is to you or to Chris, but is there, or have there ever been any mandates from the city to limit the amount of water that we're using? So if one side of the island is using more than the other, how do we conserve the water that we have? How do we, you know, it's not dire times right now, but it's gonna be. And the sooner we start letting people know that they need to conserve water, the better. Because I don't see us building these infrastructures that you're suggesting we need.
Yeah, we'll address the issue of the closed aquifer. To my knowledge, in my brief time here, I know of no previous water conservation mandates that have been posted upon the public or any other water user.
Thank you, City Manager. And so we spoke about this. We went to KPUD last year and did a tour, and they were showing us water usage. And they did tell us at the time that the south end of Bainbridge Island uses the most water in their network. And at the time, I think a lot of us were talking about it, and we were thinking about irrigation, lawns, folks who might not even live here who water when they're not home. Waters are on timers. And so that is something that we're going to have to start talking about further is conservation. Okay, one more crack at it by Councilmember Hytopoulos and Councilmember Marl.
Please remember, I was short because I'm going to try to say some stuff fast. So first of all, going back to my original question, I just wanted to clarify. I thought, how is it we were looking at the Fletcher Bay Aquifer? Well, now we're looking at the Fletcher Bay Aquifer under the low to mid scenario. And back on 121 and 924, we had right in our face a high impact scenario on the Fletcher Bay Aquifer. And honestly, those are the most disturbing and worrisome images showing us the potential of over 100-foot drawdown of our deep water aquifer, which is a very limited resource. So I just want to make it clear, okay, we're looking at Fletcher Bay, but why are we no longer looking at the most worrisome images? This is not where we should be talking about. This is not about housing, actually. This is not about equity. This isn't about being welcoming. This is a scientific exercise to try to rationally govern our city, and politicizing it or making it emotional about above all, casting dispersions on people who from our community or on the dais or on our committees have hard questions about our groundwater are somehow anti-affordable housing or anti being welcoming to anybody is really unfair. And it's really shouldn't be how we're using our time when we're trying to analyze these facts. That infrastructure issue, the state is not going to say, oh, I'm sorry, you can't afford to build those towers of, the water towers. The state will tell us you have this horizon to figure it out, just like they did in 1110. And even though 1110 doesn't affect us this time, that is how the state does things. If the state wants housing on Bainbridge Island, there's going to be housing on Bainbridge Island. And as I said the other day, if we aren't looking at, I'm not talking about the 20-year horizon. The 20-year horizon is we're spending so much time focusing on the 20-year horizon as though the only purpose for this exercise is to, again, to justify the upcoming population increase, when we need to be planning at the current level in the context of the larger understanding of where can we go from here. And I do believe we can scientifically understand some boundary somewhere, especially with the deep water aquifer, maybe more so than the higher aquifers, which are so climate sensitive. That's an unknown. We have this deep water resource with very old water that isn't being recharged in a great way. So bottom line is, I'm going to try to actually be helpful here, I hope. And I guess the last thing I have to say about comments have been said, conservation's huge. It's important. We want to change behavior, but for a conservative plan, which is what we should do with a finite resource, should be based around what we know about human behavior, not what we want it to be. So here's my concern. I want to take us back to a year or more ago when we first started talking about this. And I pointed out to us that we don't understand a lot of things. Like we don't understand what, if we still have an early warning level, where did that come from? What does it mean? We asked for education. We asked for monthly meetings. We're this far out. I don't feel like the council really does understand. I'm glad that some people feel like this was a really useful document. I don't think the council still understands a lot of things about the aquifers, the impacts of drawdowns, et cetera. So what I'm requesting is, and I'm going out of order here, I would like to have the opportunity, like we did with the feedback to the Planning Commission on the DEIS. I would like an opportunity for all of us to submit our questions. What are our remaining questions that we need to understand about the system, the impacts, the data use, et cetera? I, as a council member, I don't like come here and react to the presentation and wonder if my questions be answered. I would like to submit an organized set of questions to be answered. I would really prefer, I would like to hear back from Luke or anybody else from EA because they are the experts, and that's who I would like to have my answers from. So I am going to make a motion in a second, I think, for that, since I know the city manager's going.
Can we pause for, does anyone have any questions?
I have,
Because if we don't have questions, there's
I
no
have
point in.
question.
Oh, well.
I'm waiting.
Does it,
It's a
I
question.
feel like I've asked my question. And you know, the last time we did this and everybody submitted questions and then we sat down and we didn't even talk through the questions. And I think if you have questions, submit some. I'm not here to stop you doing that.
just go ahead and do it. Yeah, I think we're making this something it's not. So I
Okay.
think finish with your questions and then Councilmember Morawaki, and then we'll move on.
Okay, well, I have a couple more things I'd
Okay.
like to say. And I am going to request personally the ability to submit questions ahead of time, some point to be answered so that I can be a well-informed person understanding. I think the council needs to be educated receivers of the report. I think that the timeline for the report is extremely worrisome. So it's we're being projected out at the beginning of April for that to the first time in all these years this has been being worked on, for the draft written report to be presented to the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee and the subcommittee and the public and the council and everybody. And basically there's 1 month where there'll be one meeting with each of those committees to look at it and one meeting to give feedback. And that will be it. I have never heard of anything like that with regards to an important, significant document that's coming forward from all of this time. As we know, as I've asked before, to start seeing chunks of it on agendas, for the committees to see chunks of it. So I am going to ask this, and meanwhile, May 6th, we'll get to May 6th, and that's when we will talk about what we're going to do for public outreach. So when you look at that compared to the timeline for the comprehensive plan, it's really hard to understand how the groundwater management plan is going to be reviewed, processed, and adopted so as to actually inform the comprehensive plan. I'm not seeing that working here. So something needs to be adjusted with regards to the amount of time that our resident experts, anybody in the community, us, have a chance to live with this document and ask questions and have it revised if needed. If somebody else doesn't make a motion for peer review of the ultimate report, I will absolutely do that in a moment. And then my last concern is, hold on 1 second. Yeah, I guess that's it because it's peer review. And
Councilmember.
yeah, I will. Okay.
Councilmember Morawaki.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. This came up in public comment. It was actually a good idea. When I first moved, there was only one winery. Now we have what, 6, 7? And we never had a brewery or distillery. And so is there any way to ferret out the water usage by industrial use versus residential? That would be really, it could be a policy decision for us because, and I don't want the price of those products to go up, but if it is a disproportionate use, there should be some sort of method to make sure, because I'm sure the pools are these huge pools. The water in that pool can probably take care of a golf course for years. So I'd like to, if there's some way to measure out the use of those large users of volume of water, both industrial and otherwise, I think that's a discussion point I think we need to look at as policymakers.
Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, so with that, Councilmember.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make a motion that the council direct the city manager to explore the appropriate entity and questions to be asked, et cetera, best practices for peer review of the groundwater management plan when it has been produced.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Could I speak to it, please?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. So this is something that is a standard thing to happen to important scientific documents like this that an entity is supposed to rely on, and it's something that can be done, and it's been asked for by people in the community. It's not just our subcommittee. When I've talked to community members, this is what they'd like to see. When I talk to people who've worked for the EPA, this is what they'd like to see. So I really hope we'll consider doing this so that we can help ensure this is the most credible document possible.
Okay. Councilmember Fairfield Johnson.
Will we know where this money is going to come from for?
Yeah, through the chair, there are actually two things that are coming up here. One is you have a motion before you for a peer review. I think considering the interest in this, yes, peer reviews will cost money. That will be an additional consultant. The brief history here is USGS produced a document. Aspect Consulting was a firm that was hired. We then moved to EA in the interest of a firm that did less actual business on the island. Then upon that work being completed, then to have a peer review. The issue of the peer review may be this too. The peer review may not be a peer review of the entire document. One of the things we may look at is, will there be a peer review of specific questions or sections or portions of the document? And that might be a way to accelerate the time and reduce cost as well as a suggestion. But no, I do not know how much that might be. And that would be coming out of the same source of money as the groundwater management plan.
Thanks, City Manager. Deputy Mayor.
I can't support the motion for peer review without knowing how long it will take and how much it will cost. I think it's simply complicating the matter. There's validity in the data. There's validity in the interpretation of the data. It's acceptable validity in my view, even if it'll always be questioned. That's the way science works. But we have waited a long time for this, and whatever its value, I think it will be real when the draft is delivered to us and we can engage in conversation about it. But it is getting in the way of what I think is more urgent and more important business for this community. Many people will disagree with me, but I've really thought about this, and I'm not just being a dreamer or something, or in too much of a hurry to get the planning work done.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I also am not supporting this. I think there is so much data here. We can look at the data. We can look at it every which way. We don't have a lot of water. It's a finite source. I don't think we need a peer review to tell us that we need to conserve water, that we don't have water, that we live on an island with finite water. So to me, peer review is spelled P-E-E-R, I think. I think it's a typo. I really think in this case it's D-E-L-A-Y, delay. So no, I don't support the peer review. Mayor, so Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you. What the city manager mentioned as far as asking, having a peer review answer specific questions is kind of intriguing to me. I'm wondering if there could be a way of doing it such that our questions are listed and the answers that we've gotten so far, and then what it is that we are uncomfortable with about those answers, if we could be very specific about that. Now, that puts a lot of work back on us. So I will support the request because I think that we will have to make a second, a second, I'm sorry?
Sorry.
It'll come back to us with the amount of money and the amount of delay and whatever. And I think it's fine for us to have that information. But I think we need to be very specific about what we ask for in terms of a review.
And so you are out of order. This is just to let you know. Okay, Councilmember Hytopoulos.
I would just like to defend myself for a moment, if you don't mind. This is my 10th year on the city council. I have a lot of experience with this issue. I was here when the USGS report came out in 2011. I'm a person of integrity, a lawyer, a fact-based decider. I don't feel confident in what I've got before me. It's based on my own observations and experience. And this is the most important decision possibly that I will make during my tenure on council. So my request for peer review, my request to be given the opportunity to ask maybe 10 questions or something that I need to understand, even though, again, I'm the most experienced person on the council dealing with this, is entirely motivated by, for the benefit of the community, the future of generations who are here for years to come, and so that I can make a good decision.
Councilmember Pantry Johnson.
I just wanted to say, I agree with Councilmember Snyder that it won't hurt us to ask for it. And to get the information, we can make a decision whether or not we want to have a peer review, but we need to have information up front first.
Councilmember Deeds.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll just say is I agree with Councilman Schneider and Councilmember Fenton Johnson, and I apologize. I kind of spoke inadvertently when you were speaking, so I'm sorry that kind of confused things. So yes, let's find out what the costs and because I don't want to delay, but we do want to assure the public of this report. So let's get the information, and that's why I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
My point was that it's just, I don't see what more a report can tell us. We know we don't have water. That's my point. Councilmember Morawaki.
Thank you, Mary Matthews. I'm intrigued by the amendment proposed, I suppose. I think it would be useful if we did have a series of questions that we've done in the past. I think it was a good process, and see how those are answered by this current consultant. But if they're unclear or not, and there's going to probably be that, I would like it's not a second opinion, just another look at it, I guess that's a second opinion. But yeah, I would be welcoming some sort of limited review of that sort.
Okay, well, we had a motion on so motion was made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that motion passes.
So Mayor, this is what I would propose that we would approach this. Staff will work with identifying a qualified pool of consultants, preferably more than one. This is a qualification-based selection process, not based upon cost. So we would look at the qualifications. The next piece of that is just to clarify the direction. There was a suggestion that council members can submit individual questions. I'd like confirmation for that because if we're doing it with EA or in the future as a future scope, we just want to be clear on that there's a collective decision that we're going to answer those questions and incur those costs in order to complete the scope. So first, to summarize, again, we're going to look for consultants. We're going to, based upon their availability and qualifications, availability would be really important, whether they complete the work within a reasonable period of time. And two, if we are going to then be looking at specific questions, or people have specific questions now, that I can be free to know that we can engage the current EA to answer those or respond to those questions now.
Okay, with that, we are moving on to the next item on our agenda.
So that is clear that I would then be able to accept individual questions and engage EA to answer those questions.
So if we have questions, send them to you.
Yes, and then we'll work with a consultant to respond to those questions.
Okay. All right, so next on the agenda is consider ordinance number 2025-04, amending chapter 1530 of the City of Bainbridge Island Municipal Code to reduce traffic impact fees.
So let me try to set the stage for this. And as the council knows, it adopted updated traffic impact fees. After the adoption of updated traffic impact fees, which were prepared to provide the nexus needed to extract a fee to identify improvements intended for the circulation system, specifically improvements that were targeted towards alternative transportation. The city council adopted fee structure. Subsequent to the adoption of the fee structure, the council heard concerns that the fee structure perhaps could be modified to address small commercial redevelopment projects or small projects. With that direction, staff has researched an option for the council and is recommending to the council that consider reducing traffic impact fees for small commercial redevelopment activities. And Chris Worsvicki will provide that to you. This ordinance would not be proposed for adoption at this meeting, but would be moved forward to another meeting just as an introduction. I will say this was based upon what we believe to be the council's interest in revisions to the traffic impact fee ordinance. At that time, we did not read that the council had interest in expanding the reduction or modification of the traffic impact fee ordinance to other uses beyond making modifications to small businesses. But that's what the current ordinance is focused on. At least the ordinance we're bringing to you is focused on is reduction for small commercial businesses and not other possible considerations.
Thank you, City Manager. As City Council, as the manager just mentioned, this is a fairly minor change verbiage wise to this ordinance. It's in response to discussion that we had with the council back on June 18th of last year. It would exempt retail and commercial businesses less than 5,000 square feet that have not been vacant for more than 12 months from traffic impact fees. So for example, if there was a storefront on Winslow Way that had a clothing store that was there for a year, and then within 12 months of leaving that space, a restaurant or another type of use was moved into that space or vice versa. So any use change, there would not be a traffic impact fee associated with that change in use. A 5,000 square foot building is about, I believe, about half the size of Rite Aid at the Safeway Plaza. So that's about the size of space that we're looking at. It would apply mostly, I believe, to most of the smaller spaces in our downtown area. Happy to address any questions you may have about that. And as the city manager mentioned, this is an exemption that other cities in Western Washington have also applied in their codes. They don't all use the 5,000 square foot threshold, but they do all sometimes use other means of addressing commercial and retail uses to get a similar outcome. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Dietz and then Councilmember Hightower.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make the motion, but still allow for discussion because I see another light on. I move to forward ordinance 2024-04 to the February 25th, 2025 regular business meeting for introduction.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Councilmember Dietz, seconded by Councilmember Morawaki. And Councilmember Hightower.
Yeah, I have a question about this, and then I have a question about other uses. But for this ordinance, the vacancy, the 12 months vacancy, does that end when a new tenant gets there and starts developing, or where does that fall? So my question would be, does it have to be a vacant property, like I guess up for sale or something for 12 months and not in operation? Or I mean, because if someone leaves and someone comes in 4 months later and then they're not able to get their use going again, where is that? Because this is almost perfect and it might be perfect, but
Through
how's
the
that
chair,
told?
vacant means doors are padlocked, windows are closed, no one's going in or out, it's not being used.
Okay, and do we define vacant in here or anywhere else?
No, to the determination of the director. But again, vacant for me
Okay.
means there's a hasp on the door, there's 3/4 inch plywood on the windows. It is clear that it's not being used.
Okay, that's fine. And so I'm going to be supporting the motion. I just want to raise the question of, I want to understand whether we're going to have concerns about situations like the renovation of Helpline House, because it's not a commercial use. It's probably larger than 5,000 square feet. Are we about to have ourselves dealing with another one of these where we would not want to be imposing an impact fee for use that's already there but redeveloping? Is that an issue that's about to rise up or not? Because if it is, I'd want to tackle it.
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question.
Okay.
Other than maybe it could be asked. At this point in time, this proposal to the council is to address small commercial uses, 5,000 square feet or less. If the council is concerned about other uses that would be impacted by the traffic impact fee, the council could provide that direction. The basic assumption is that no one wants to pay fees. So that's why I have a difficult time answering that question. It's up to the council to determine who should the fee be imposed on in a fair and equitable way.
And I want to be clear that I am very much, and I've been very supportive of not making exceptions for fees. So it's not about making exceptions for fees for a nonprofit. It's about the whole concept of this particular fee, where if there's already a use and now there's another use that's just going back in there. So I guess I want to put it out there that if it comes across the city's desk, that we're going to be charging similar fees to a redeveloped nonprofit like Helpline House that I hope that we will revisit that.
Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. I support this proposal, this change in our transportation impact fees as much as I really, am trying to protect our revenue sources for doing alternative transportation. I think we also have a big need to protect the entrepreneurship on the island and small businesses. So I do think that this is a reasonable sort of compromise and exception. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We had a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And next we are on to consider resolution 2025-03, amending the fee schedule by adding fees for renting the lawn area adjacent to the rowing club at Waterfront Park and for short-term moorage at the city dock.
I will provide some explanation here from the dais. The city has a master fee schedule. You have adopted the master fee schedule. There are two fees that staff is suggesting the council consider for inclusion in the master fee schedule. Let me address one fee because I know that first, and then we can address the second one that people have come to comment upon. The city has typically charged a moorage fee for the docking at the city's dock based upon vessel length. That was a traditional fee. With the beginning of the new year, the city generally raised its moorage fees, but in that process, what had been a short-term moorage fee was deleted. We now want to propose a short-term moorage fee for tie-ups up to 4 hours. The proposed amount is for vessels under 30 feet, it would be $10. For vessels over 30 feet, it would be $15. That is to respond to the request that there be a short-term, again, moorage fee established. The other fee proposed involves a piece of city property that's adjacent, as was mentioned, to the Bainbridge Island Rowing Center. The subject area is a lawn maintained by the city. It is not a part of the lease of the rowing center. There are requests, my understanding, to rent that space or to reserve that space. When we talk about a fee, the fee is charged for the exclusive right for a private party to use that public property for a particular piece of time. It doesn't typically apply to a casual user who just is using that for the moment, but for someone for a particular reason would feel that they needed to reserve it for, say, a wedding reception or even a bocce ball tournament. Someone who is doing something casually, somersaults, bocce ball, that didn't involve the need for an exclusive reservation would have no need to reserve the space. The space is very convenient to the rowing center. The rowing center has very nice steps down to this lawn area. This is an enterprise activity similar to setting a fee for a municipal golf course. In other words, you have latitude on what you could set that fee at. One of our management analysts, Laura Shearer, conducted a survey of looking at other fees that were established. And also we took a look at the rental fees being charged by the rowing center. The rowing center is renting out their facilities, and they range from a low for Monday through Thursday evenings, as I understand in their printed fee schedule, of about $250 an hour, to wedding receptions on Saturdays, which are 6-hour minimum at $3,500. We're certainly open to discussing. This is not intended to harm or impede the rowing center's business activities. But again, this lawn is not part of the rowing center. It's city property, and it's up to you to determine that. The fee that's being proposed would be a fee that would be $370 plus $100 for residents and $470 plus $100 for non-residents for all day. So that would be an all day reservation. It would not be an hourly fee. Staff was looking for a fee that would be consistent with the basic rental rates that the rowing center would charge. And I think the rowing center's interested because they understand there is somewhat of a symbiotic relationship, especially again, it's directly adjacent. There's steps down from the rowing center to this lawn area. But again, it's a city lawn. It's up to the council to establish what you think the appropriate rates would be. And we're certainly happy to work with the rowing center on that. But at this point in time, there is no fee, and we think it's be appropriate that there is a fee. And we can tell you that we have received contact interest from people about renting that lawn area.
Councilmember Morawaki and then Councilmember Fairtroy Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor
Oh,
Matthews.
Councilmember Schneider.
On the mortgage fees, that seems really reasonable. I mean, $10 for 4 hours, that's $2.50 an hour, and $15 for 30, that's $3.75 an hour. It's not a burdensome fee for, especially for boaters and especially for motor boaters. That, $2.50 might get you enough fuel to get out of the harbor. And on the concept of the lawn, honestly, one of the comments I heard earlier, it's a bit disingenuous to compare them to the park rentals. The Japanese American community has a biannual picnic. They rent a big picnic place at Battle Point Park for whatever it was, but that is hardly the kind of facility that would be something that would be at this lawn. That might be a musical event, might be a beer festival. The shelters at the parks it's apples and oranges. It's really not. It's a false equivalency. So I don't agree with that. And I think the fee rate is reasonable. Again, if you want to do it by hour per day, that's about $40 an hour for the rental of a big place like that. I just don't find it that unreasonable. And again, this is public property. This is it is adjacent to, but not part of that facility. And again, that facility is also on public property too. So I think this is standard, and you've done a study of comparing it to other cities. Is it in line with what other communities charge for similar properties? And this one is really high value. It's right on the water. So there's a premium for that location as well. So I really don't have an issue with these proposals, and I would be supporting it.
Okay, Councilmember Schneider.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So again, I think that the first part of this proposal is fine. I'm glad we're doing a short-term rental for boats and whatnot. On the second part of it, I made a personal inquiry to this venue, and I'm hoping I remember some of this correctly, but I do remember being told that there would be an additional fee for making this side lawn area an exclusive part of it. But what I also remember is that it had to do with alcohol usage, is that if someone was using alcohol and you didn't have control over that space, then the party people would have to make sure that nobody stepped down off those steps, with booze in their hands or something like that. Anyway, I don't know if that changes anything. I think I still support this proposal. I think that it makes sense that private use of public space have some compensation to the public. And especially if there's alcohol involved, then you do need to kind of cordon it off so that it is under control. So I will support this.
Okay, Councilmember Fairtroy Johnson.
I want to support it, and I'm going to make a motion, still discuss after. I move to adopt resolution number 2025-03, amending the fee schedule by adding 2 fees. One for renting the lawn area in the waterfront park that is adjacent to the rowing club, and one to provide for short-term moorage at the city dock.
1 second.
Okay, I just, one little point of discussion before we vote on that is I had a chance to go down and visit with some of the residents of the open water marina last week and talk about this issue. This issue is fine, but they did say that if we are going to consider further, that we should think about the open water marina residents and just some more access for them. They currently get 1 hour Tuesday through Thursday to get in. So if we were going to be doing that, if we would consider a discount for the off-peak rate for residents. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Hydopoulos.
So actually that I would like to follow up on. So that's concerning. That's one of our affordable housing options on the island. So that is interesting. I'm surprised they have 1 hour during weekdays to get anything done. That's a little worrisome. So I don't know. I hate to hold this up because otherwise it was going to be an easy one for me. So I think we need to potentially address that, and maybe we can talk procedurally about addressing it and proceeding tonight. My question actually about the rowing club, the spot except for weddings, as hearing about alcohol, I'm just kind of wondering, what are we doing here as far as our relationships with who's overseeing this, who's taking the permitting fee, and who's verifying the alcohol use? I mean, so it's like, can somebody explain to me what our legal relationship is becoming into these alcohol events? And it sounds like there's two entities now, a private entity in the city, and these two areas, and fees are kind of intermingling. So I just want to make sure that we're being smart about liability, and there may be no issue here, but that just sort of strikes me.
So through the chair, first of all, with the short-term mortgage fee, we recommend the council move that forward because again, we inadvertently the lower fee went away. We'd like to reinstate that. But I think that that's something we could talk about in terms of for the live aboard residents. And I will say, just independent of this, recently we have established a policy that when we open the cold weather shelter, we also are allowing the liveaboards to tie up for free during that period of time. So just want you to know we've done that administratively so it's easier for them to get shore power and heat themselves. We could bring back some consideration, but again, if we adopt this, may not be perfect, but we adopt this, we can come back. With regard to the rowing center, right now, how our system works is we have a special events application process. One fills it out. We go through a variety of different things. So this would be subject to the special event application process. However, we have discussed, and again, we're open to discussion, is using the rowing center as an agent, since they are the ones that and the way that we see it's typically going to be for weddings, that people are approaching the rowing center first, and that perhaps we could work out a business relationship with them, that in this case, they would be our agent. And once we set the fee, they would collect the fee, and they would collect the fee for being our agent and handling that piece. But right now, we're set up to handle this as a special event application.
Councilmember Hydopoulos and then Councilmember.
Thank you. I just actually, I got that question from Councilmember Schneider's comments, and my first question, which I forgot and I want to follow up on, is I heard from Councilmember Milwaukee that the city manager said that we had compared other jurisdictions. Is that correct? Because I hadn't caught that. So I just want to verify.
We did compare other jurisdictions. Again, that's Laura Shears is here. She can tell you the jurisdictions we compared to. Yes, we are higher than Bainbridge Parks. We do think this is a little bit more of a unique property. And we did look at them at the rental rates being charged by the rowing center as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Milwaukee.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Matthews. This is really important because I can't remember which Grand Old Fourth, but there was one where that was the beer garden area.
Oh, yes.
And who was
Beer jail.
Yeah. Anyway, something happened there, so we weren't involved. Yeah.
Okay. So we had a motion and it made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with that, we move on to consider contract for proof of concept for enforcement of ferry line cutting.
I'd like this item to be introduced by the police chief briefly. I will just say that this is being brought forward. You as the council are the arbitrator of community interest and values, but from staff's perspective, it feels that ferry line cutting is of high interest and importance to the community. We often hear about the disappointment and ask why can't more additional enforcement be done to prevent people. And we've heard the stories, and we've probably all been in the situation too, where we've been waiting in line ourselves We need to get that next ferry, and we noticed someone cutting the line right in front of us, which caused us to think whether we're going to make it to the toll booth or not. We recent state laws have changed, which allows for technology to be used, but it's, to our knowledge, it's not, this technology has never been used before for this purpose. Although camera enforcement is very common for speed and red light. And with that, the Chief Clerk.
Good evening again, Council. Joe Clark, Chief of Police. We've all seen that intersection and we've all heard the complaints about the ferry line cutting. From an enforcement perspective, it requires us to witness the violation. We have to be able to pull that car out of line and pull them over safely and without, further interfering with the traffic there. So it's a very difficult process for us. It would be very manpower intensive to do so. And we simply don't have the resources to manage the ferry line. As the city manager mentioned, traffic safety cameras have been in use, approved in Washington State since 2005, so they're nothing new. In 2024, there were some expanded opportunities, one of which was the ability to use cameras for ferry line cutting enforcement. I have been unable to find any other locality that is doing this type of enforcement. You do see HOV violations, toll violations, of course, speed and red lights. It does not appear that anyone is doing this sort of ferry line cutting. We have a situation complicated by two intersections in our line. And we have local businesses, we have residents, and of course, we have the ferry maintenance yard. So we have a good mix of local traffic and ferry traffic, and sometimes a confusing traffic pattern setup. What's being proposed is that we deploy these cameras to see the feasibility of identifying these violations and being able to enforce that. Require two cameras, one further up at the intersection at Winslow and one further down near the toll booths, because we don't want to have someone get in line inadvertently trying to go down to the condos there at the bottom, and they get captured in some sort of violation. So we want to be able to weed those out. And Genoptic has told us that their cameras can do this, and this is a test period for us just to see how it works. The enforcements, when that occurs, if we come to that eventuality, the enforcement is still done by the police department. An employee of the police department has to review every violation, and you do that by looking at the camera footage and determining, did the person commit the violation, and if all of the elements are not met, then that alert from the system is rejected. That's pretty much an overview of the system. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Through the mayor, I just realized that there was a mistake. So let me explain to you. In the reproduction of the agenda, this was the contract and this was the scope of work. The scope of work was not attached to the contract. So I would ask that you not take action because I want you to be able to see the scope of work. But let me tell you a little bit more what we talked about. Again, this was just an error in the production of the agenda. For whatever reason, the scope of work got detached from here along with the insurance certificates. This is intended to be a proof of concept period for 60 days in length, basically 2 months long. Genoptic has trailer devices. They would deploy at least two, maybe three trailer devices. The one trailer device would be monitoring turning movements at 305 Winslow Way. There are basically three turning movements. One is the turning movement from the local lane into the ferry only lane where people cut in there. The other is, quite frankly, the westbound and eastbound turn lanes off of Winslow Way to Olympic, which are no longer allowed. Parenthetically, staff hopes to bring, we have been told by WSDOT Olympic Region that this configuration is permanent, and we hope to bring to the council a CIP project to address the turn pocket that still remains. Another camera would need to be deployed by the ferry toll booth to see if someone who looks like they had cut the line actually shows up to toll booth. That's what we need in terms of verification. If we go, we will not be placing the required signs at this time because no citations will be issued. Do we want to just see if the technology will capture what we think are people that are cutting the line and do that in 100% consistent, reliable fashion? We don't want to make any mistakes. Like the chief mentioned, it's reviewed by the police department, and the police department actually issues these citations. When the state legislature allowed for this technology, they put limitations on it to address concerns dealing with privacy. Although I will tell you the technology is capable of doing more than we needed to do, we are limited by law to the way in which we're proposing it to be used. The alternative to camera enforcement, again, I can tell you from I'll just say it could be close to 15 years or 20 years, red light camera enforcement has been used. And when that was first introduced, there was an element to allow people to game the system. Again, this is different. The first version of red light camera enforcement involved placing a sensor at the limit line, and then and when someone triggered it, the camera would go off. People decreased the yellow cycle to make it easier for people to run the red light so that they would be caught. That became very controversial and was stopped by state legislature, by courts. Hopefully that type of game in the system is in the past. The alternative that we have been talking to the state legislature about, and also WASDOT, is currently the state legislature provides $1.1 million for human traffic enforcement at the ferry terminals in general. What the state employs is they have a service that uses off-duty peace officers, and they provide human traffic enforcement. This past summer, through the help of our lobbyists, WASDOT relocated money from Kingston, who apparently just had a lot more money than we were allotted, and it was very effective, and to have the human presence there. We have asked the state legislature to increase that budget allocation by $900,000 to $2 million for all the ferry terminals. The state is in a tight financial situation. We don't know if they would do that. So that is also in play. We'd like to see it moved up to 2 million, and we hope that we would have more human presence. All that said is that because you do not see the scope will discuss the placement of the cameras during the period of the proof period, the processing potential citations, the review by the police department. You should be aware of that. I'd like you not to take action, and we'll have this on your next agenda.
Yeah. Thanks, City Manager. Even though it's on the, do we still want to, okay.
Yeah,
Councilmember
I
Fancher
just have
Johnson.
a question, going back to the privacy and security. Will it be in the scope of work, what's gonna happen to the data after this proof of concept period is over?
I don't know if the city attorney or the chief has a better answer than I do.
The scope of work says the data belongs to the city of Bainbridge Island, and the state code regulates how that data can be used.
Okay. And I just wanted to make sure I understand that the cameras are only looking at the license plate.
That is correct. The code prohibits pictures, photographs of the drivers.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hytopoulos and then Councilmember Morlocki.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that because I thought it didn't, but I will say I'm looking at the RCW that's protective and it's great. It's really can't use it for anything except enforcement of this and they get it all that. So that's really great. And I also want to say that I really appreciate hearing from the chief that that our local officers will be reviewing these, because I had actually contacted the city manager earlier today reading online about this approach where, anyway, this company sending out the tickets, make a lot of mistakes and so forth. So this will really help with that you all will make the decisions instead of an auto ticket being generated. So I feel better about this than I did earlier today.
Councilmember Murwaki.
Thank you, Mayor Matthews. I don't know about you guys, but next to roundabouts, this place is the second most talked about thing and frustration for people on the island. And I keep reminding them, but it's a city, it's a state highway, even though our road intersects it, it is the state responsibility. But so this is one way we can actually step in and do something. Listening to the chief's earlier report, one of the reasons why our citations and things down are because we're understaffed. We had at least 4 vacancies. And so to suggest that our police officers would spend hours there just trying to direct traffic is just simply a colossal waste of our public resources for that. And I find this a really good, and I heard you, one question, it's going to be all turns. So turns from the ferry only lane and also turns from the center lane, trying to cut. Is that what you're going to capture?
Yeah, at this point in time, you cannot turn from Winslow onto Olympic to access the ferry. You can't
Right.
turn it to go to the maintenance yard or the condominiums and not to the ferry.
That wasn't what I'm talking about, the ferry only lane people going down and then people turning right onto Winslow Way as they used to do in the past. Can those be monitored? Because that's illegal right now.
That's a different violation. I don't think that can be enforced with cameras.
Ah, darn. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to the report.
Okay, with that, we are moving on to our last item, which is endorse public engagement exercise for alternative transportation project.
Probably Mayor Matthews or Councilmember Schneider and Itopoulos would be a better person to introduce this. But the participants of the Association of Washington Cities Collaborative Elected Leaders Institute have gone through training to introduce new ways of engaging the public. As a part of that, this committee of 3 have asked if the council would endorse a plan that they have to have a public engagement exercise referred to as a modified World Cafe. Again, I'm not the person to talk about what the World Cafe consists of, but they would like the council's endorsement to conduct a World Cafe. The purpose of the exercise would be to engage the public in an alternative transportation project, probably more specifically a circulator plus other types of alternative public transportation, with also a not to exceed small amount of $1,000 from council contingency. And with that, Mayor, I think you probably would be a better person to provide an explanation.
Thanks, City Manager. So the 3 of us really wanted a chance to come check in with all of you before going out, scheduling things, potentially spending a couple $100 or something like that. So it's just a check-in of, we are wanting to have this cafe event, the climate, there was just a climate cafe a few weeks ago. Basically what it is, it's a manner of engagement in which you bring folks in, you have 4 or 5 people at a table and you give them a topic. There's one person who stays with the table as a facilitator, or we do that, yeah. And then we go through and just get really, really, really good engagement and sort of, we can gauge interest and start really to get folks excited about the possibilities of ways to get around Winslow and out of their cars. Did that explain it well? Okay. Council, did anyone? Okay, Councilmember Murwaki.
I like the idea. I'll put the motion out. We can have a discussion later. I move to endorse the proposed Washington Collaborative Electric Leaders Institute, or WASELI, public engagement exercise related to the alternative transportation projects, and provide up to $1,000 from the council contingency funds.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, and just wanted to apologize to the community for that outburst before. I think our council is very healthy and does really great work together. We don't always have to agree. That's the point of being 7 folks. They can have different opinions. And so we're good. I hope the community member, she's okay. No worries, it's all good. So let's just think about ourselves as a welcoming and inclusive city and go about our evenings in a positive way. And with that, we are adjourned.
Okay.